Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Just want to cover a couple quick things before we get started. My name is Ethan Collier, and I'm chairing today's meeting of the Chattanooga-Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission. And you've had some slides that have been playing for the last few minutes covering how we do today's meeting in regards to the procedures. But for those of you that are new, I want to walk you through it. So Planning Commission's received this packet in the mail within the last probably about a week, and Planning Commission's had the opportunity to review it in advance of today's meeting. And so from time to time throughout the meeting today, we'll move pretty quickly. And so hopefully you have a copy of the agenda in front of you. Follow along as we go through it. In each case, I'll read off the case number and the address so that you can follow along. Let me say this. What I'll do is I'll read off the case, and then in each case, I will ask if there's any opposition present. And if you're here and you have a question or you have a concern or you are in opposition to the application that's in front of us, please make sure to raise your hand when I ask if you're here in opposition. Because if you don't raise your hand, then it is possible for Planning Commission to have taken action without having heard from you. And we want to make sure to hear from you today. So in each case, I'll ask if there's any opposition present. I'll ask if there's an applicant present. If you're here in opposition or you've got questions or concerns, make sure to raise your hand. If we don't have any opposition present and we have a staff recommendation to approve, then oftentimes we'll take action without having heard from anybody because Planning Commission's reviewed it, staff has reviewed it, and we'll sometimes, most often, approve it without hearing from anybody. If there is opposition or if we have a staff recommendation to deny, then we'll want to hear from the applicant. We'll want to hear from the opposition. We'll first hear from staff. Staff will do a presentation. That'll be coming from Mr. Schultz here in the red sweater. And then we'll have an opportunity for the applicant to come up to the mic. The applicant will have a total of 7 minutes to present their case and why they have applied, and they'll have some discussion with the Planning Commission members. And then after they get done, they can take their seat. The opposition will have a total of 9 minutes. I will say that we very, very, very seldom will allow for the total time allotted to opposition to go over that 9 minutes. We stick pretty closely to it. And so I will ask that if you're here and you're in opposition and you want to speak, to make sure you get out of your chair when it's time for opposition to speak and line up on this side of the room over here behind this microphone. That way I can see that there's 12 people that want to speak and there's only 9 minutes. I can make sure that as many of those people as possible are heard from. If you're speaking in opposition to a case, the other thing I would encourage you to do is, we are your audience. We're here to listen to the reasons why you're opposed. And oftentimes there's more than one person that wants to speak in opposition. If you're at the microphone and you look behind you and there's 4 people behind you, please be cognizant of the fact that we only have 9 minutes for opposition total. Sometimes I have to cut people off, even though they're not done talking, because I've got to make sure that we are able to hear from everybody else. The other thing that's really important to us is that opposition isn't repeating itself. So from time to time, we'll have somebody come up, they'll introduce themselves, state their name, address, and they'll tell us all the reasons why we should not approve the case. The second person will come up and say the exact same thing. The third person will come up and say the exact same thing. That's not necessarily the most helpful for us as we make our decisions. It's most helpful if we're presented with some new information. So just think about that as you're, up here presenting. We're your audience and we're here to learn and get a better understanding of what it is that that we might not. But it's most helpful if you're giving us some sort of new information. After opposition gets finished with a total of 9 minutes, the applicant will have an opportunity to come back up to the mic, and they'll have 2 minutes to respond to anything that they've heard or any questions that we have. All the discussion that happens today will be between the Planning Commission members and the person at the microphone. I only say that because sometimes people get confused and they think that they're talking to staff or they think that they're talking to other people in the audience. Just keep in mind that it's a conversation between us and the person at the microphone. Then we'll take action on the case. In regards to most of the cases that we hear today, they will go on to City Council or County Commission. And so make sure to follow along with those follow-up dates. Mr. Schultz, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's it. You do have several, just for the record, we have some STVR applications in the county that were submitted last month and this month that are still on hold, waiting to see what the county does in terms of moratorium. So those are not on your agenda. That's why you see the numbers are not in consecutive order. We are holding those until that decision has been made.
The applications are being held until the till a decision about whether or not there's a moratorium.
No, there is a moratorium. It doesn't expire until this week, I believe it is, or next week. So we can't process until that decision is made by the county commission.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, we'll jump into the agenda. What is this, and why is this? Why there was a separate?
Yes, that if you look on the agenda, it's item number 3 under subdivisions.
Okay. Thank you.
That was to be determined at the planning commission meeting.
Okay. First case on our agenda, case 1 under subdivision plats and variances, is SD 2022-0050, and it's located at Sawyer Road subdivision. It's lots 1 through 8, located at 6808 Sawyer Road, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0051, and it's the River's Edge subdivision. It's lots 1 through 379, located at 1200 Judd Road. And this is a variance to Chattanooga subdivision regulations, corner lot radius and minimum right of way. As a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0052. This is preliminary plat, River's Edge subdivision, lots 1 through 379, located at 1200 Judd Road, and this has staff recommendation to be approved at Planning Commission meeting. That's
actually no, it's a defer for 30 days.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's the staff recommendation. We had several meetings with the developer and the development team and with the city folks up until last week. That's why it didn't make the packet, but we're recommending to defer at this time for 30 days.
Is there any opposition present? We do have a motion to defer, and it has been seconded, and that was for 30 days. Is the applicant present? Is the applicant on the same page with that? Okay. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0053, and this is located at Stanford Gap. This is Stanford Gap Road townhouses, lots 1 through 41, located at 6860 Stanford Gap Road, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition? I have a motion to approve. It has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, first item under old business is case 2022-0234, and this is located at 8229 and 0 Middle Valley Road, and this is an application to rezone from A1 Agricultural District to an M1 Industrial District. Staff has recommended to deny. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Okay. Brian, can you we do have a lot of new members here, so it would be worth just taking us back through the lion's share of the staff presentation.
Yeah, this is a request to rezone from A1 to M1 for manufacturing industrial use. The actual use of the property is proposed to be an excavation contractor and landscape supply sales office. And the property is about 1.34 acres in size. The zoning of this property is A1. To the north is A1. To the south is A1 property. To the west is A1, and to the east is R1 and R2A. You can see there's no industrial zoning in this general vicinity. The applicant did speak to us via email as well as Hamilton County Building Inspections Office on what the proposed use is. Hamilton County Building Inspections Department is based on some of the uses being proposed. Sounds very similar to a contractor's office, which was only allowed in the M2 zone. So we've changed the recommendation still to stay deny, as there's no other M2 zones in this property. Since the time once the applicant received the staff report, I think they've again changed their use to just an office. However, office use will not allow outdoor storage or outdoor vehicle storage as well as materials. That's why the County Building Inspections Department is saying M2 is the more appropriate zone, as this use is very similar to a contractor's outdoor storage yard. If you look in the zoning map or aerial map, this is a vacant piece of property. At one point, it did have like a little commercial type structure. Not sure when that went away, but it's fairly old. To the north is single-family dwellings. To the west of this property is single-family dwellings. And to the south is single-family. Once you go to the east, across Middle Valley, you see more single-family and a couple of duplexes mixed in. This is a view of what used to be on the site. It's like some type of little repair shop that's since been closed many, many years ago, looks like. This is also a view of the site. They've listed the applicant's materials where they cleaned up the site. Another view of the site, Middle Valley Road, just on the right-hand side. This is a view south of the site, which is, again, single-family dwellings. This is east of the site, which is a duplex. There is no adopted land use plan to provide guidance on should we introduce manufacturing zones or manufacturing-type uses in this general single-family neighborhood. So when staff looked at this, whether it's M1 or M2, the proposal is not compatible with the surrounding uses. The proposed M1 or M2 zones or districts would introduce nuisance-type uses. And so staff recommends to deny this request.
Thank you. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right, sir.
Dakota Griffith. So we were, after last month's meeting, we were trying to reach out and kind of work through what we needed to do as far as like, we kind of ranked what we wanted to do with the property. We started on the 18th with emails, and we actually requested to go in and sit down and like talk with them. We didn't hear back until after the case was already done. So that was kind of done through email. So it wasn't, the email was initially sent kind of as like, you know, priorities, office space first, and just kind of work down from there. And we didn't hear back until after we had already got that in the mail or in email. So when we responded again, I just kind of broke it down and said like office space, and I put parking for our trucks, our equipment. I put in the email, our equipment doesn't have to be stored there. We've got other places we can store equipment. So as far as like everything else, we really are wanting an office. I don't know if the trucks make that manufacturing because they're pickup trucks. I wasn't sure about that as far as how that goes. But as far as like dozers and track hoes, those don't stay there. I think there's kind of a misconception of what the yard's going to be used for because of when you say an excavation company and you look at the equipment that we own and what's sitting there right now. But that's because we're in the process of, we've taken out all of those trees, all the structures that were there. There's a bunch of like clearing and stuff like that going on. Once it's done, like I said, I have other places for equipment. I really just want to build an office building, park trucks there, and just kind of have it as like a home office. I definitely would not. Our equipment wouldn't even fit on that lot, more or less store it all there. So I think that's where the confusion came from. It's kind of going through email, not relaying that like we were wanting to.
Thank you. So to be clear, what zone are you, or maybe Mr. Schultz, you can say this, what zone do you understand that they're asking for now based on?
Office uses, my understanding, would still not allow the outdoor storage, the storage of the trucks. I mean, the request originally was M1. We were told by the Hamilton County Building Inspection
So
Department.
in office, you wouldn't be allowed to leave a vehicle parked overnight?
I don't know the
Or
shaking his head, I think.
Well, to the chairman's point, I believe if it's just vehicles associated with the office, trucks, that type of stuff, I believe probably the nuance would be if it's equipment or the application initially had landscape material storage proposed. That's outdoor storage of product. That's not allowed in an O1. And then I would say any type of large scale equipment. If you're talking about passenger vehicles or passenger trucks that would show up and leave from an office, I don't
I think
think
staff see is just if it is, we don't know what those type trucks. It may be office trucks today, but next week it could be the equipment trucks.
Well, the equipment trucks would be out of zone because
Right.
you couldn't store tandems, trailers, equipment in an O1. So, and I don't know if that's what you're planning to do or not. But I guess my question or my point would be there are specific things that you can do in an O1 and you can't do in an O1. And I think what we're trying to do is tell you the nuances that you cannot do in an O1. But if you got an O1 office zone and you started storing equipment there or you had outdoor storage, you'd be in violation.
And I don't know. I'll speak from just me, staff. I'm not sure staff would also support O1 at this location.
That was going to be my point. I think, when you look at the zoning map, I think it's just going to be a little bit of a stretch without having a plan in this area for, just any kind of more intense use like that without, the community and everybody being somewhat supportive of it. So, I think even a commercial district, you're likely to have staff be a little bit doubting of it. Unless it's something that's truly seen as being supported in the community.
So staff would likely make a if he applied for O1, we would see a similar recommendation for a denial.
I would think so.
Probably. And I think the other problem here is, again, we're going to be working on both city and county zoning codes next year. There could be some path in the future where something like this would make sense, but the way it is now, M1 would be a big rezoning out there. So I definitely don't think it should be M1. I leave it to the planning commission to think, or county commission, who will ultimately hear this, if they think another commercial or office use might be there with some kind of truck overnight parking. That might be more appropriate, but definitely not in
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Mr. Matthews.
Would R4 apply for office?
I don't believe the county has an R4 zone.
County doesn't have it?
No.
It's just city only?
It's city only.
Okay.
Any questions for the applicant?
I was not here last month, so forgive me if any of this is redundant, but what is the use right now as it stands? Like, just help us understand what's actually happening on site.
The block building was an automotive repair shop. They closed that down like 4 years ago.
Okay.
The building's like very dilapidated. They actually put that portable building there as like an office an office to run the repair building. We got rid of the portable building because it was full of termites and stuff. But it was an automotive repair shop, so it's been for everybody in that area knows it as being that building with a bunch of abandoned cars parked around it forever.
It was probably there for some period of time.
It was
grandfathered in.
But just me thinking out loud here, I know O1 doesn't necessarily seem appropriate just given what's around it. At the same time, neither does an abandoned building. It feels like that's something that we could potentially upgrade through zoning. Whether that balances out with the neighborhood in the area, I don't know that I have the answer to that yet, but it certainly seems like a better solution in my opinion, just on the surface, given what's there now. So,
and the plan as far as an office building is something we're not building some huge building that really stands out and looks bad. It's going to be the plan's like a 3-rail wood fence around the whole property, office building, no like lit signs or anything like that, or logo on the front. Offices in there for the three of us to work out of, and a parking lot for trucks to pull in, pull out of. It's kind of the plan. So it's not some over extravagant like office building by any means.
Mr. Webster.
You said if there was like an overwhelming support from the community, but there's nobody in opposition. So if there were people in surrounding properties that said that they supported it, if they got signatures of people in the area that say, hey, it is better than being an abandoned building and they're, running. I mean, would that have any bearing on it? I know that you have it's against the code, but to your point, it is better than an abandoned building having something functioning there. So would that help at all, staff? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think we would definitely agree that we don't want to just have abandoned buildings that could be better used with some commercial use or some other use. But I think something like that would be helpful. Absolutely. If the, I don't know how Brian feels about it, but I think to have the community at least aware and supportive of what they intend to do. We actually have a zoning case right now, completely separate, where the something like this kind of use, and it's been a real problem with the neighbors. So I think as long as he's willing to do something like that and then abide by it, I would think it would be appropriate.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, that discussion, that's a good discussion that we're having on that. Would you would be willing to, if we were to say vote for office, then you would be good with that? You would
Any
provide
restrictions or whatever, that's not a problem at all.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we change that to 01.
So we have a motion to approve an 01.
I'll second.
And it has been properly seconded. Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. Interesting conversation. The idea of moving to 01 based on the description of the project makes some sense to me as the neighborhood has evolved and this has been a part of it. However, thinking about how we would potentially rezone this piece of land, I would need to fully understand what's allowable within 01 within the county. I'm unfamiliar with how big, how much land he could disturb, all of those things, because most likely we would need to put some conditions on that from this body if we're going to vote on that motion today.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to read off the uses allowed.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, in 01, you can do single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, schools and libraries, parks, playgrounds, churches, professional, medical, or dental offices and clinics, offices, schools, funeral homes, barber and beauty shops, daycare centers, and on-premise signs. There's also other special permits like a PUD, single-wide manufactured homes, and could also do a high-rise multifamily and office structure. That's through a special permit through Board of Zoning Appeals.
So
There is no site. If 01 is zoned for this entire site, basically the whole entire site could be developed as 01 uses.
And with that, how high what's the building height restriction?
2.5 stories and 35 feet.
The office building we're looking at is 16 feet, just for conversations. 16 feet.
What do you mean the one you're looking at?
The one we would like to put there is 16.
Oh, so the plan would be to demo that building that's there and build a new office building?
Yes, because as we've gotten into doing looking into that building structurally, there's a bunch of issues about what building we actually found out. Just more as we went on, but that was kind of what we were looking at.
And expanding on the height, there's also through the Board of Appeals, you can do a special permit for high-rise office structures that would require a permit to go through both. I'm not sure there's any things to look at other than fire protection if that goes in front of that board.
What about percentage of land disturbed? So the size of this piece of property is 1.34 acres. Beyond building, how many square feet are you thinking?
The building, oh, sorry.
1,800.
So he's thinking about a very small, relatively small building, but how much of this potentially could be built
No
out?
building shall occupy more than 50% of the lot. Right now, it's 2 lots, technically.
It's 2 lots technically.
Yeah, that's like with this one little structure, as you can see on the screen, that where the existing little block building is 1 lot, and then to the north of that is another lot.
So we would be rezoning 2 lots to 01.
Yes, or you could rezone a portion of the site. I'm not sure what all he needs for the 01. If it's just strictly the office, you could just actually, as a planning commission, recommend just to rezone. Let me see if I can get my pointer here.
It's a lot to do from a die. I don't know if you want to do this.
Yeah, you could do something like just maybe split the zoning, keep the remainder A1. That way you won't have a huge 01 office zone sitting there.
Okay, thank you, Brian. That's offering.
Is the building's all on one piece of property, right? Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question for staff. Would O1 have any setback requirements next to the R1 or the R2?
It would. Let me check on those. I think it's just typical 10 foot on the side, 25 in front and rear.
So that would be in addition to the limit of only 50% of the lot. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, it's just 25 on front and rear and 10 foot on the side.
The challenge is that we've got a motion to approve 01. I think that there's some discussion here that there should be some conditions if it's 01, which we've been in this situation before with staff where it's helpful if we have conditions, but staff's recommended to deny. Planning Commission is leaning towards approving a different zone than what you guys were even looking at. And this is where it would be so helpful if, while it has been deferred once, if it was deferred again with that in mind, it could potentially come back to us as a recommendation. I don't know exactly how. I know staff struggles with it because you don't really want to recommend approval of an 01 when you don't think it should be an 01. But Planning Commission is
I think staff
likely
would
to
be,
approve an 01 without conditions, or we're trying to draft our own conditions up here, which is really
and
not
I think staff at least could be somewhat closer to a recommendation of approval of 01 with some conditions. I think M1 is what we've been working from. So I think M1, we're pretty much conclude that that's not a good use in the residential area.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the second question is, would that be the entire site or just to look at a portion of the site?
Well, I guess we'd hope that that would be worked out prior to
Mr.
coming
Chair.
back before us.
Mr. Reuter,
Yes, sir.
so if we were to defer this a second time and have you go back and bring this back next month with some conditions, would you
Absolutely.
Be open to that? I don't know if you're open to give us some conditions to vote on now.
We can do it either way. If y'all would like us to try to, I think the best thing to do would be to defer for 30 days. We could probably try to work something out before the county commission heard this, but I think it'd be better to try to do it before the planning commission, if that's okay with you.
Mr. Chairman, I withdraw my motion for the 01 and recommend the deferral for 30 days.
We have a motion to defer for 30 days, and it has been properly seconded. Any further discussion?
I'm just curious to the applicant, do you have a conceptual of the building that you're planning on building? Okay. I think it'd be great for us to be able to have access to
We
that
can
too.
have that before we come back to it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could we also, would it also be possible to have them bring any community support or contacts they all have had with the community to the next month's meeting?
Yeah, that's not a problem. We've talked to several of the neighbors, things like that, before we ever got to this point. So I don't think that would be a problem.
That'd be great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0237, and this is located at 420, 21, and 22 East 16th Street, and it's an application to rezone from URA3 to UCX4, and staff is recommended to deny. And Brian, it would be helpful if you take us back through that.
This originally was a request to rezone this entire piece of property, which is 1.13 acres in size, off East Main Street. And these numbers here for the new planning commission members are form-based code zones. So the request was rezone this entire piece of property from urban residential attached 3 stories to urban commercial mixed use 4 stories for proposed hotel, restaurant, retail, and remote parking. Looking at the zoning map, there is similar zones nearby. UCX 3 and 4 to the north. To the east is URM3. To the west of this site is URA. Go further west, you have URM3. So there's similar type zones in this general vicinity. Looking on the aerial map, this is about 170 feet to the south of East Main Street. You can see East Main Street to the north of the picture. To the west is Washington Street, and then Adams Street to the east. This currently houses some single-family detached dwellings. To the north of this property is commercial. To the west is vacant land. Then further west east across Adams Street is single-family detached dwellings. To the south of this side is institutional uses, and to the west is multifamily and single-family. This is a view of the site south along East 16th Street, which is some of the single-family detached dwellings. This is also the site, but this is north of 16th Street, which are some of those small shotgun houses that are on the property. This is further north of the site along East Main Street. This is south of the site, which is a church. And finally, east of the site, which is railroad tracks, and then across the railroad tracks is Adams Street. You see more single-family dwellings. And to the west of the site is multifamily and single-family dwellings. There is no land use plan. They do have a land use plan, which is the downtown plan, which is adopted in 2006. It doesn't really provide any land use recommendation. It does provide some policy goals. One of those was constructing a range of new housing around Jefferson Heights Park. This should include a mixture of single-family housing, duplexes, and apartment units. So last month, staff recommended to deny the request, which was, again, to rezone the entire site to this mixed-use 4-story hotel zone for hotel use and retail. So staff felt the proposal was not compliant with existing residential uses and development form of the area. The downtown plan recommends introducing new variety of housing types. The expansion of the UCX4 zone would introduce a variety and potential of commercial uses that are not compatible with surrounding residential development form. So this is the site plan that was submitted last month. This case was deferred for them to come back and talk to staff. We've since done that. And on this property, they have changed the request. The request is still to go UCX on the northern part where those shotgun homes are, but to go 3 stories, which is dropping 1 story. And then to the south is to go URM3 for multifamily instead of a hotel. Here's the applicant's project description since last month. Again, the request is to do a split zoning designation on this property, to have URM3 for the southern half of this property, proposing 28 1-bedroom unit apartments and 10 2-bedroom units for a total of 38 housing units in this location. I think currently with the housing units on the south and to the north, I think there's roughly 12 units. So some of those will be going away, but will be replaced with some multifamily. On the UCX3 zone to the north, the proposal there is for light commercial uses and on-site parking. More like startup business incubators is what they're proposing to do. And also remote parking for off-street parking. Here's the site plan that was submitted after that change last month. You see the north, this green purple area, that's the UCX3 request, and everything to the south here, they're requesting to go to URM3. I believe staff is comfortable with the URM3 to the south. I don't believe we still support UCX3 to the north. So with that, staff, this is the revised staff. I think staff, again, supports URM3 to the south and not support of UCX3 to the north.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? Councilwoman Hill.
First, Brian, will you please go back to the slide that gives us the breakdown of UCX3, URM3? Okay, thank you. Now, with this, please walk us through your recommendations with these 2 things here in front of us and the what and why of those. Because you said, it sounds like you're okay with the residential multi-unit.
Yes, staff last
still
time
have concerns about commercial mixed use.
we do, and since it's not a plan that provides that guidance on should we introduce more commercial south of Main Street, staff is being more conservative on that approach to the northern part. The southern part, it does provide more housing. needed through there. They are losing some housing units, but they're gaining more housing units. And RM is very similar to the RA zone. So that's, I think, staff's thoughts on that recommendation.
Okay. Based on, talk us through what else could happen within the UCX3 zone beyond what this project's vision is.
Oops. Let me get the form-based code zone. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Again, typically you would have given us one of these and we would have had a point by point within our documentation, but we don't have that.
Well, we don't have this because our staff recommendation was originally to deny.
Mhm.
When it came back, we didn't have time to change our recommendation,
Mhm.
which once it's rezoned to CX, without conditions, which we don't try to place conditions on form-based code, any of the uses allowed in that zone would be permitted there. Also, the height is 3. Doesn't mean they can't go in front of form-based code and seek an additional story. But the UCX zone, you can do retail, any type of retail, vehicle sales and rental, heavy industrial. Artisanal is permitted. Small scale alcohol distilleries are permitted. Research and development is permitted in that zone. Let's see what else. Community gardens, daycare homes. There are some limited uses in terms of drive-through facilities, home occupations, outdoor dining. But it does allow wide range of retail uses.
And it can go 3 to 4 stories, which is
Right.
already allowed in the other parts of the property as it is zoned currently.
Correct. And you do have, go back to the zoning map, just the north of this property, abutting this property to the north, that is the UCX4 zone. So they can go 4 stories. To the east, you have CX3. I think staff's concerned with introducing more commercial further south off of Main Street
Okay.
into the residential neighborhood.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Just a clarification. I've lived in this neighborhood for 11 years, and I just want to point out that while the map doesn't indicate this, this is a dead-end street. 16th Street actually dead ends there at the railroad track, and if you walk the neighborhood, as I know Commissioner Graham has, this feels more like Main Street than it feels like the rest of Jefferson Heights because it's so disconnected. And it's more tied into that commercial corner than it is with the other single family houses. You can't access it by car from the other single family houses. There's one. Outside of this footprint, there's only one. It's not their zone multifamily. There's one, to my knowledge, there's one house a block away from there that had to get permission from the form-based code committee to have an ADU in the back.
Is the applicant present? So, could you state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, name is Scott Smith, architect with Efforts Road, 1426 William Street in the South Side neighborhood. Landon can't be here. He just had a baby, so congrats, Landon. So I think since URM3 seems reasonable, I think I'll just start with like a brief description of the district there, based on Mr. Anderson, what you had kind of said. There's kind of 3 really strong boundaries in this district that create this pie-shaped wedge of land. You've got the split of Main Street and Rossville at the fire station, and then the railroad that crosses Main Street at Velo. And that really is kind of its own district. Within this district, there's quite a bit of variety of commercial uses. Fire station, you have healthcare, CHI Memorial, Blue Fox, Heaven and Nail, Adele's, Exile, retail, there's studios, galleries, there's office furnishings at the kind of southernmost corner. Events and entertainment, Grand Fallon, the escape room. You've got the Baptist church. You have tons of parking. And then as far as business services, Chattery, Curates, the spa, Realty, lots of different shops, right? In residential terms, you've got a strip of 3-story row houses along Willowight Street and a strip of 3.5-story townhomes along Washington. And then the balance of the single family residential is really our parcels there. I think once you rezone those 2 parcels, you're left with 1 single family home and then a handful of duplexes. You know, in terms of land area, about 75% of this is UCX or UCIB. The remainder, the 25%, is a residential zoning. It's URM or RA. So, you know, our thoughts on the UCX designation on the north property, you know, really our vision there is to revive those existing structures. We love the architecture of those shotgun homes. They're in pretty bad shape, but the goal is really to try to do what we can to revive those and turn them into small businesses or shops or some sort of food service establishment that can continue to contribute to the growth of that neighborhood and provide affordable commercial space with close proximity and visibility to Main Street. You know, obviously you've got the 7 single family homes. They're about 700 square feet each, in need of significant repair. And there's also some significant flooding issues that happen at this dead end street here that would need to be addressed with our development. And that's the intent as well. So the proposed work is to reuse these 7 structures, improve them significantly, maybe even complete reconstruction, which may be necessary, and providing some common platform that would connect these structures together and create a small kind of retail establishment that could house 7 to 14 really small business retail incubators of some sort, right? Depending on how you split those front and back. The thought being that you've got, you know, you have quite a bit of rapid growth in this district. You have lots of businesses that are being displaced because of rents and square footages. And this would be an opportunity to introduce some of that into a neighborhood where some of the local makers, which is a very strong component of Chattanooga, could have an outlet to start their business or, you know, provide growth in Chattanooga and generate wealth for themselves. And so that's the intent here. Because it's a commercial zoning, we have to jump to UCX. UCX 3 is the lowest we can go to get the use that we're looking for. And so that's kind of the intent there. This would really constitute about a 3% increase in commercial land area for that district. And that's about it. I think square footage maybe would be even less. I think, you know, that's sort of our goal. I hope that, you know, I wish that there was like a zoning classification that was a little bit in between the two, but we're kind of working with what we have. And so the hope is that we can provide the multifamily on the south side, increase density, provide units of comparable size for the neighborhood, but increase that unit count by about 30 units, while also providing some affordable commercial use to the north side and alleviate some of the pressures on the Main Street corridor that I think we're facing with businesses and hearing about business. I mean, Syrup and Eggs just said that they're having to close. So there's a lot of businesses I keep hearing about that are struggling with that. And I think the way we can solve that is potentially having less square footage that's more affordable, maybe maybe 1 block off of Main Street, but keeping that creative class in our city. So Thanks.
Hold on just one second. I'm sure there'll be some questions. Are there any questions for the applicant?
Have you spoken to any of the property owners directly off of 16th Street in the single and multifamily across from the townhouses?
I haven't personally, but the person who's buying these two properties, our client who we're representing, has, and I know he's been over there multiple times, and I believe some of them. I don't know how many are actually even occupied at this point. Most of them are not, shouldn't be occupied.
So I'm speaking about. Are you talking about these multifamilies just to the
No,
northwest corner?
the ones inside of our yellow boundary.
I'm asking about the adjacent property owners in the multifamilies to the northwest and the single family to the southwest.
No, we haven't, and we have reached out and a few times to Requetta to kind of discuss the neighborhood and everything, but we have not, as an applicant, done that. No.
Councilwoman Hill.
I actually have spoken to the people that live there. You all know that we're here last time. I had a lot of concerns about this project. I've since seen photographs of the flooding. I've seen the homes. I would agree that they're barely habitable, though doesn't change the fact that we will have some people who will have to find a different place to live. But the gentleman that lives in the single family home on the corner, I spoke with him at length. He's very positive on the commercial piece. I also spoke with the gentleman that lives in one of the townhouses. And in those conversations, it very quickly became one of a classic rezone conversation of who likes a townhouse versus who likes an apartment. And that's part of why we have a planning commission, to sort things like that out. But I can attest to the fact that there's not a great amount of concern from the surrounding neighbors. I have not spoken to the people that live in the existing homes, but this area floods to the point that cars get flooded almost to the roofs. So the homes, I'm certain, are pretty derelict.
Any other questions for the applicant? Is there any opposition present? Mr. Matthews.
Brian, could you go over exactly what they're requesting and in which area one more time so I can have it clear?
Sure, it's on the screen here. To the south, in the red, south of 16th Street is URM3 for multifamily. To the north of 16th Street, where those shotgun homes are, that's UCX3. I believe the intent is to keep those structures, but connect them with a boardwalk, if you will, I guess. Each structure do like small business incubators. Does that help answer?
So you're good with the RM3. It's just you just have the question for the commercial CX3.
Well, staff, since there wasn't a land use plan to provide us guidance to follow, we were, again, RPA was taking more of a conservative approach. Let this play out in front of the Planning Commission today for you guys to make a recommendation. Again, just looking at the zoning map, you do have UCX4 and 3 to the north, which would be an extension of those zones. We just didn't have one of our components to look at as a land use plan that would help provide, should we introduce commercial uses south of Main Street, East Main Street.
Okay, thanks.
Further south, I guess I should say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Graham, County Commissioner, District 11. I live at 104 Fern Avenue, Chattanooga, Tennessee. My question would be the flooding. The architect just said, the architect firm that's representing the client said that they would take on the engineering and the responsibility for the flooding. I would see this be approved, if for no other reason, just to get the flooding taken care of in that area. And like Councilwoman Hill said that, flooding is real bad there, over a car when it gets to, we have these episodes. If this project not only rehabits that part of the neighborhood, which is what started Main Street in the first place, right? So it's in my opinion, it would be along the same guidelines, but more importantly, the infrastructure needs that are there would be addressed immediately by this project. I think it would be a benefit to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
The commissioner's got an excellent point about the flooding. This entire neighborhood floods with anything more than a light rain all the way to the railroad tracks near Central Avenue. And in any kind of improvement in the area, especially not one paid for by city tax dollars, is greatly appreciated. I'd like to move approval for the revised applicant's request of URM3 for the south portion and UCX3 for the northern portion, Chairman.
We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, first item under new business is case 2022-0247, and it's located at 1622 Bratt Street. And this is an application to rezone from R1 to RTZ, and staff is recommended to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Do you have any comment in regards to the conditions in particular?
I don't have any comments.
Okay. You're
Just wanna
familiar
know what
with
the
those?
conditions are.
I'm sorry?
I just need to know what the conditions are.
No parking between the street and the building. So basically, you get to have rear parking for this project.
That's fine.
Okay. We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case is 2022-0250, and this is located at 8402 Old Lee Highway, and it is an application to rezone from A1 and R2A to R3, and staff is recommended to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? You're the applicant. Do you have any comments in regards to the conditions? Okay. If you don't mind, while it's a little unconventional, we'll hear your comments on the conditions first, and then the staff presentation on it.
So, my name is Derek Blackwood. I'm with MAP Engineers. We're representing the developer on the request. And our comments are that we originally started off with 21 townhome units. We've reduced it down to 19, so it's a density of 8.6 dwelling units per acre. I've actually got our proposed responses to the conditions with our own conditions, if I may. So as they're passing those around, the first condition we have no issue with. I think it's the second condition, limiting the maximum density to 5 dwelling units per acre. The third condition that we propose is that we would have a maximum of 4 units per building. And then as far as the landscape buffer to remain along Old Lee Highway, we've increased that to a 25-foot type A landscape buffer along Old Lee Highway and allowing allowances within that buffer for ingress, egress, and signage. So really the crux of the concerns with the conditions that staff recommended is the maximum dwelling units of 5 units per acre. And I'll be happy to go into more as to our reasoning for that if you would like, whenever you would like.
Mr. Schultz, can you take us through the staff recommendation? And then we'll come back to
Sure.
the proposed zoning conditions. Is there any opposition present? Okay, just stay right there. We'll hear from Mr. Schultz, then come back.
This is 2022-250. This request is rezoned from R2A rural residential and A1 to R3 multifamily residential with conditions. Number of acres is 2.2. Again, they were originally proposing 21 dwelling units. That's a density of 9.5. On the zoning map, you can see to the north is R1. Further north is RT1. Just to the south of this site, it shows up sort of like a whitish, vague looking color. That's all in Collegedale. So I think it's C2. And then to the east, this side is R1 and R5. So you have a mixture of residential zones in this area. This was the original applicant's condition with the application, talking about a 20-foot deciduous tree planting strip along Old Lee Highway. There's been no recent zoning history for this particular site. There have been some adjacent zoning requests to this property. And again, the property to the south is located in the city of Collegedale. This is an aerial view of the property. You can see it's currently being used as a single family dwelling. To the east and west of this side is vacant property. To the south is vacant. If you go north, that's single family. And then further east, you do have single family. So everything around this general vicinity is single family detached dwellings. This is a view of the site. Another view of the site, what's being used on the property is single family dwelling. This is north of the site, Stillwater subdivision, which is single family detached dwellings. This is the east of the site. Site's just on the right hand side along Old Lee Highway. This is looking west, Stillwater subdivision just across the street, and site's to your left. This property is located in the White Oak Mountain Area Plan, which again was recently adopted in 2020. The plan recommendation is suburban residential place type, which primary uses are single family detached with densities between 3 to 5 dwelling units per acre. It does allow 2-unit houses with limited massing, so as long as you limit the density. So staff looked at this. The request is compatible with the Area 12 plan if the density and building massing is consistent with single family dwellings in the area. The request would be compatible with adjacent land uses and development form. So staff proposed conditions. So the request would be in compliance with the land use plan. That's why you see our 4 conditions from staff is maximum building height of 2.5 stories or 35 feet, capping the density of 5 dwelling units per acre as that comes from the plan recommendation. Maximum 6 units per single mass building, again, trying to be in compliance with the adopted land use plan. And a 20-foot landscape buffer to remain along Old Lee Highway, excluding ingress and egress to the parcel. This is the original site plan submitted with the request showing one entrance off Old Lee Highway and a single mass building with multiple units in it. Again, that's where we're trying to break those up. The applicant did submit a revised site plan on 12/9 showing a reduction from 21 to 19 dwelling units and breaking up the massing of the units. So staff's conditions, again, come from the basis of trying to be supportive of the land use plan.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? I have a question. You're saying your proposed zoning condition is a maximum of 4 units per each single massed building. Correct. And in the drawing, there's one that's 5. Is that right?
There's one that's 3. And
okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just misread it. Okay. And the others are 4.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. So your thought here was that you were giving more on conditions 3 and 4.
Correct, we are, and that's what really kind of kicked us down to 19 units. But also, in looking at the surrounding areas, we're completely surrounded on all 3 sides by a commercial zone. It is in the city of Collegedale. We do understand that just in the immediate vicinity is single-family residential. But if you look a little bit further to the north, there's quite a few townhouse developments, and I've got a handout here, if I may, pass it around. Okay, I'll keep one for myself. Thank you. So, in looking at these townhouse developments, the unit count, it varies. The densities, though, it ranges from anywhere from 7.5 units per acre to over 12 units per acre. And so it's within about 1,000 feet of the development. We feel like that we're in a good transitional zone. This is in keeping with the area. with what we're proposing, landscaping wise, you're pretty much going to screen yourself off from pretty much anything out there. And we felt like that this is an appropriate development for the area. So as you can see, there's 3 or 4 townhouse developments in that area, ranging from 7.3, 10.7 units per acre, 9.2 units per acre, and 12.4. And with our revised density of 8.6, we felt like we were in keeping with that area.
Mr. Chairman, and just for the record, for the note, those townhome units were built prior to the adopted land use plan, which is the end of 2020, which does set a density cap now.
Yeah, Mr. Berg.
Mr. Schultz, could you clarify the underlying height, density, and buffer requirements both for the current zoning and in the area plan?
As far as the current zoning, it's A1 and R1. It's R2A. It's the same heights, 2.5 stories, 35 feet. The plan recommended a density of 3 to 5, regardless of the zone. A1 does have a density now in the county of 2 dwelling units per acre.
Sorry, what was that?
It's 2 dwelling units per acre in current A1 in the county. Density max.
Okay, and what is it for? What are we trying to rezone here?
R3, 2.5 stories and 35 feet. You can go up to about 19 dwelling units per acre.
And what's the 19 dwelling?
Yeah.
And then what about the landscape buffer?
Budding C3, since that's C2, would not be required buffer. Okay. Because that's in City College. Budding commercial wasn't require one.
Mr. Chairman, can I make some comments, or are we
Sure.
still in questions? I'm just curious why we're conditioning the height if that's already covered in the underlying zoning. I'm always reticent to. I always question why there's all these conditions on properties, especially if it's already covered.
Sure. In the county, in R3 zone, there's also a special permit that you can go in front of Board of Zoning Appeals to get a height exception for it doesn't have a mass height.
So this would
it's a high rise typically for O1 and R3.
So this is essentially precluding them from applying for that.
Yes. If you didn't have that condition, they could, in theory, go in front of the Board of Appeals and apply for that special high rise permit. I think it is. You can go up to 100 foot. But you're right. We try not to put conditions that's controlled by the zoning, underlying zoning.
And is there any requirements as far as the massing in
No.
R3? Okay.
No, there's not.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Maybe.
I do have one question. You had mentioned what the zoning was of the property that's currently in Collegedale that surrounds you. Can you speak to that again, please?
Yes, sir. It's a zone commercial. I think it's a C2 zone.
The entire piece of that surrounds you.
Everything you see in that drawing that's in the pinkish gray is City of Collegedale. It's a single property zone commercial.
Yes. Thank you.
And I believe Cassie, I think, reached out to Collegedale. You find out there's no plans in the way to develop that as of right now, I don't think. Okay.
Councilwoman Hill.
The strongest piece of, or strongest fact that's been brought to me today is the fact that the Area 12 plan was passed in 2020, which is only 2 years ago, which says to me it's a very relevant plan. And I personally would like to see us as a body hold a great deal of respect for those plans and use them as a tool in our decision making.
Brian, can I ask a question? Because I think another council person did. The A1 is 2 units per acre, but it looks like the majority of this is R2A. Is there a density cap in an existing R2A zone?
It's 7,500 square foot per lot.
So whatever you can
get in there.
Okay.
And I think just looking at the conditions again, I think the real difference is number 2, where we're talking about the density, whether it's either 5 as recommended by staff or 8.6 as recommended by the.
Yeah,
I think other conditions are very similar.
I think that's the only one we're debating about. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, got a question.
Mr. Matthews.
For Brian. You may not recall this or know this. When they did the aerial plan and recommended the 5 units per acre, is that right? 5?
Yeah, 3 to 5.
Did they take into consideration the areas that are shown on the that he submitted that shows that the density is quite a bit higher than that?
I was not involved in that plan. I cannot answer that question. I don't know if any other staff knows the direct answer to that. Yeah, I mean, that was built prior to the plan being adopted. I think most of that comments probably came from the public in terms of what they're trying to see in this area.
If I may, the area in green is presently under construction and has been, as my understanding, more recently approved. And that area is over 12 units per acre.
Brian, he's talking about the handout that he gave us.
I'm not seeing them.
Yeah.
Trying to find that.
Yeah. I've got a copy, Brian.
What's Mr. Schultz? What's the purple that's all around it? That's C2, City of Collegeville.
Yeah, the big on my screen is showing Y, but it's just everything south of this side along Old Lee Highway to the south.
Would this project be permitted if it were in that zone?
In C2?
Yeah.
Yes. In the city, in the county, you could do residential.
So all the property around this piece of property, it would be a permitted use.
Except for these other 2 to the west of this, but everything around this is City of Collegeville. And we're supportive of the project. It's just trying to match the land use plan. It was 2 years old and that density requirements.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, we do have a lot of respect for the plan, and but I think this is a good fit for this area because we've got some areas here that does show the higher density. I would recommend approval using the conditions supplied by the client.
We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? And those conditions are those that have been furnished to us by the applicant. Mr. Schultz, do you have a copy of those?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case on our agenda is case 2022-0251, and this is located at 7239 McDade Road and 7413 Ottawa Georgetown Road. And it is an application to rezone from A1 to R1 and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? All right. And is the applicant present? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we also did receive some emails in opposition. You should have that in front of you in your Google or spreadsheet.
Okay. Mr. Schultz, can you take us through this? You can just stay right there. If you want to stand up, if you want to sit down, sit down.
And just be aware, the next case, 2022-252, that's a PUD that goes with this. We'll go through the zoning case at this time. This is a request to rezone this property from A1.
Mr. Schultz, can you take us through both?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
This is a request to rezone from A1 to R1. It's roughly 55.5 acres in size. Proposed number of units is 211 units. That's a density of 3.8 dwelling units per acre. Again, it's a residential PUD, single family. Again, the next case is a PUD. Looking at the zoning map, to the north is A1. To the east, you have A1 and R1, as well as some other PUDs in this general vicinity. To the south, immediately abutting this property is R1 and A1. You have some to the west, R1 subdivision. So you see a mixture of R1s in this area. So the precedent has been set for single family dwellings in this area. This is a vacant piece of property. To the north is agriculture uses and single family. To the east, across Ottawa Georgetown Road, is single family detached dwellings. Immediately to the east is under construction presently is single family detached dwelling subdivision. To the south is single family. To the west of this side is agriculture uses. And if you go further west along McDaniel, This is I think it's Meadow Stream subdivision, is all single family detached dwellings. This is a view of the site from Ooltewah Georgetown Road. Another view of the site from Ooltewah Georgetown Road. This is looking along McDade Road. This is north of the site on McDade Road. And this is east of the site, that single family subdivision that's under construction. This is McDade Road, Ooltewah Georgetown Road. Again, you can see it's more single family attached dwellings. And this is a picture of the adjacent single family dwellings. This property is in the Wolf Beaver Creek area plan, which was adopted in 2007. The plan recommendation is low intensity residential, which is typically single family dwellings with a density count of 3 dwelling units per acre or less. It does allow townhomes. As part of this, townhomes are allowed if it's in a PUD, which we'll see in a few minutes. This is a PUD, does show townhome units. Densities in excess of 3 dwelling units per acre should only be considered if the development will preserve substantial areas of usable open space. This density is 3.8, as we'll see in the PUD, but it does have roughly over 7 acres of open space in this PUD. So far as the zoning goes, staff recommends to approve with conditions. Again, the Wolf Beaver Creek area plan recommends a density of 3 dwelling units per acre. The current R1 zone, as written, would allow 7 dwelling units per acre. This request with conditions limits the density, is compatible land use plan. It is compatible with adjacent land uses. Again, the Wolf Beaver Creek land use plan recommends densities 3 units per acre or less. You can go up to 5 if you preserve open space, which they do. So staff has 2 conditions in case the PUD plan, which is the next case, fails to be developed. We do have conditions on the zoning. Approve with a maximum of 211 residential units. A 25-foot landscape buffer with type A planning requirements shall be provided for the entire lot frontage along Ooltewah Georgetown Road, with the exception of a curb cut for ingress and egress. So those are the 2 conditions on the zoning. Here's the PUD plan, exact same piece of property. You can see off Ooltewah Georgetown Road to the right, showing 2 entrances. In the middle here is a clubhouse and a pool. To the back are these townhome units that's being proposed. Let me get to the next. So within this PUD, again, I mentioned there's 211 dwelling units. It's broken down further into 148 single-family dwellings and 63 townhomes. Get to the PUD. So staff recommends to approve the PUD with a condition for lots 1 through 63, which are the townhomes in the back. The minimum rear yard setback should not be less than 40 foot from the exterior boundary line of development. Typically in the PUD, that's 25 foot. The applicant requested 40. Staff agrees with that 40-foot setback to provide distance from the proposed townhomes and adjacent single-family dwellings. So staff recommends to approve the PUD plan and the zoning with conditions. We did receive this on your screen today is the PUD plan that was submitted with the application. As of Friday, I got a new site plan with the PUD plan with this development. Looks like just a quick look this morning. The unit counts are the same. They're providing around the perimeter of this entire development a 25-foot, I think it's 25-foot landscape buffer, but I'll let the applicant speak to that. So these both come to you, the Planning Commission, of the recommendation with conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? Mr. Lyle.
I think one of the things that I'm curious about is that the term substantial amount of green space. It seems fairly ambiguous, and I was curious if there's a precedent as to, what sort of equates to substantial. If there are previous developments similarly that there were, or how does staff define substantial?
Yeah, correct. There is. It's a good point. In the zoning code, there is not a. Typically, you see a percentage, 20% open space or something like that. Our PUD does not have that. It just says substantial. 7 acres out of total of 55. I don't know. It's debatable if it's substantial or not. It does provide open space. I think Dan's. You want to say something, Dan? Or
we've had this exact conversation in staff review, and I think it's again one of these items that we want to fix in that upcoming zoning ordinance update to just give the PUD should have some a little bit more balance to it in terms of what the public and the community are going to gain than I'd say, is in there right now. So I would like to see more standards in the future.
And I would say that percentage of open space is something we've discussed at RPA for many years.
Mr. Bird.
Mr. Schultz, when you say 7 acres of open space, is that including these stormwater areas, or is that just the playground area?
It does include, I think it does include retention ponds and stormwater areas.
Okay. Just as a personal interpretation, it seems like usable open space shouldn't include stormwater areas unless they're going to be navigable in some way or swimmable. And then another question, I may have missed this. When was the area plan written?
This was 2007, so it's quite dated. It's still relevant today. You're right, and also if you look where the PUD language is written, it does say you can include detention ponds if you put walking trails and stuff. Again, that's things to Dan's point. One of those things we need to fix in the future.
Any other questions before we hear from the applicant? Mr. Blackburn.
All right. So my name is Derek Blackwood. I'm with MAP Engineers. We're the engineer for the developer on this project. I do have a few additional conditions. I think we're pretty much in agreement with staff, but after we met with the neighbors, there's one for you as well. We wanted to add a few more conditions, which is why we submitted the site plan that you see before you. So nothing's changing as it relates to the density. I think some of the questions about open space, we are proposing retention ponds that will be more of a feature than a dry pond. There's a lot of landscaping proposed on this development with walking trails. A lot of the walking trails are going to be reserved by easement and not on community space. So there's additional amenities that will be able to be utilized that's not in that roughly 13 to 14% of our entire development, which is reserved for community space. So I'll kind of go through some of the items that we've got. Condition number 1, we're proposing, just like what on the previous case, we're proposing a 25-foot type A landscape buffer all along Ottawa-Georgetown Road. We understand this is kind of a new request, and we're fine with screening the entrance to the development. We do want to make sure that we clarify. I think the staff's recommendation was to leave room for an entrance or an ingress egress. We have 2, so I think it was just some rewordage to make sure we accommodate the proposed entrances. Condition number 2, we're fine with the number of dwelling units. Condition number 3, what we're proposing is to screen the rear of the single family residential lots with either evergreen trees or deciduous trees, or even if there's an existing canopy available that we can preserve, we'll do that. It's basically at 30 feet on center. Condition number 4, same as we're fine with staff's condition on that as far as the minimum rear setback to the townhomes being 40 feet. We've added a condition that deals with the front exterior appearance of the single family lots and the townhouses being constructed of like hardy plank siding, brick, stone, similar materials, and not vinyl siding. The only thing we've limited vinyl siding for is like the soffits, facial windows, things like that, and then along the sides and the back if that's something that the developer wants to use. But the fronts will limit that to more of an aesthetically pleasing type of building material. And then the last, we understand that traffic is a concern out here, and so what we're proposing is to add or extend the center turn lane from the adjacent development across the road further north. I think it's Bainbridge Park. They have a center turn lane, and we're going to extend that all the way to the northern entrance to help alleviate traffic on Georgetown Road. So we feel like that this again is in keeping with other developments in the area, and we appreciate your consideration for approval.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant before we hear from the opposition? Thank you. All right, so if you're here and you're in opposition and you want to speak, go ahead and come on up to the mic.
Thank you. My name is Joy Perkins, 8787 Lakes Drive in Ottawa. Our biggest opposition is around traffic, which you mentioned. And I don't think extending the center lane is really going to help. And we would like to request a study be done during the height of the traffic, which would be during school season. As you know, it's just north of that roundabout, and it's already a traffic nightmare at times. Especially with the new development right across the street going in, which I believe is 80 plus homes going in almost directly across the street to the east of it. So that would be our request to do a full traffic study on it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
What I would like to add to the traffic study is that this is also Sequoia Nuclear Power Plant Evacuation Zone. And the estimated time of evacuation in a 2012 report, which was 10 years ago, the evacuation route for this area was the highest in the county. This area only has 2-lane roads. You have Mountain View, Ottawa, Georgetown, Snow Hill, and Hunter, and they all converge at exit 11. Exit 11 is overcrowded as well. So that would be another good reason to do a traffic study, because this is situated halfway between, about 2,000 feet away on either side from the traffic circle and the school. So it would be good to do a traffic study there so that you could be better informed, about the density and how many people that you're adding in that area. The other thing is you have a few things about the staff recommendation report, and you were speaking about the open space. In one part of the Wolf Teeter plan, it says that townhomes and other attached dwellings may also be considered in areas consisting primarily of low-density single-family dwellings if they are not part. If they are part of a unified development sited to the interior of that development and either served by sewers or pre-approved by the Hamilton County Health Department. And then it says from 30 to 80% of the project should be in open space. So the townhomes aren't sited to the center, and the open space is, like you said, like 14 to 15%, whereas this is saying 30 to 80%. And so those are the two references for townhomes. And then it says for PUDs, just in general, that it should be capped at 3 per acre, even for a PUD. And that if it's considered to be higher, that there should be even, more open space, substantial open space there. So these things we don't think are being met with this. And of course, like I said, the Sequoia Nuclear Power Plant evacuation zone is a real concern for all of us in the community. We hear the sirens every Wednesday. We know, the risks. We're living there, and we want that to be considered because there's a school there. There's really dense. If you look at that map, there's just a lot of neighborhoods and homes in that area. Also, that area, according to the staff report, it averages 3 acres or less for everything surrounding. And all the rezoning cases for everything surrounding it were recommended for restriction of 3 acres or less. So if you're going to rezone it, with our community, we'd probably rather it stay A1. But if you're going to rezone it, we would hope that you would, go by the plan and keep it at 3 per acre, just like the restriction for all the other properties around it have been made for 3 per acre. That's all I have. Thank you.
Ma'am, the document that you're referencing in regards to the amount of space required and the units per acre, what document is that?
The Wolf Teeter area plan.
Okay, thank you.
It's in, there's like 2 places where it mentions townhomes. Okay, and one is under the low density residential, and another is a little bit more detailed on the form of the different types of neighborhoods that can be placed in certain areas. And so that was the only other reference to townhomes that I could find, for the low density residential. For one of the development, the neighborhood development plans that was recommended for low density residential. It was in there. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think the opposition stated her name and address, just for the record.
thought she did, but can you come back up and state your name and address for the record?
It's Kim Helton, 8618 Snow Hill Road, and I actually printed it off. I didn't print like a lot of copies, but I printed it off where it said that about the space.
Thank you.
The open space is under open space subdivision development, which is where it talks about townhomes, and I think it references PUDs in it as well. And so it's on the continuation of the next page, and right underneath where it says the part about the townhomes, right underneath as it says, from 30 to 80% of the project should be in open space.
Thank you.
So as it relates to traffic, again, we do understand traffic's an issue, but we know that the majority of traffic going to be entering and exiting this property is going to be traveling northbound, and having some discussions with traffic engineers and having worked on multiple developments up and down through here, we understand what the requirement is going to be, and it's going to be a center turn lane. And so we just ask that we be able to continue forward, understanding that a center turn lane is going to be required, and we understand that, and we're willing to make the arrangements to accommodate that. As for open space, it's our opinion that we are providing ample amenities and ample open space to accommodate this development, and staff has seen that the density is appropriate for the area. I do know that there are several recently approved PUDs within the vicinity, ranging anywhere from 2.8 to 4.0 units per acre. So we feel like that we're in keeping with that as well.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Bird.
You mentioned there's some trails planned through this. I'm not seeing those on the side plans.
Okay, so it's a little hard to see since the scale is so large. If you look at the townhouse development, you'll see a bunch of trees around the perimeter of the property, and you look at the section views down at the bottom of the page. So the bottom left, the one at the top in the middle of the sheet, the section view, it shows a row of evergreen trees at 20 feet on center between the walking path and the property line for screening the adjacent property, and also a row of deciduous trees at 20 feet on center between the walking path and the townhouses. And then also, if you look closely, there's some gray shaded areas that meander into the single family areas along the perimeters of the ponds and things like that connect the development to the sidewalks within the road network and all of that. So that's where the sidewalk path connectivity is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Lau.
Can you maybe walk us through the what is driving the request for increased density?
So if you look at the townhouse section of the development, it's tucked back out of the way. We do feel like that the townhouse is an appropriate development. There are different PUDs in the area that incorporate the townhouses. We felt like that this was an appropriate location for it, tucked back out of the way. But as far as the density goes, it's in order to make it a viable development and also provide the necessary demand for the different building types in the area.
I guess I just feel like typically, in sort of the planning world, that increase of density is driven by proximity to some form of amenity, sort of like if you, I mean, there's numerous versions of it that you could reference, like transect ideology, where you would have increased property valuation sort of clustered around a thing, like a downtown condition, or potentially even like a clubhouse, or some sort of reason that's driving the density, not necessarily just pro forma. I understand that the development is asking for more units. It just seems like the request to deviate from the standard. I mean, you're saying you are providing ample green space, but it is pretty specific that it says substantial. And I don't know that 12%, which is the number I come closer to me, equates to substantial. If I left half of a development to green space, that would feel substantial. And otherwise, I mean, it just doesn't seem like there's a real basis for the request other than we just want to.
I mean, I think the substantial terminology with staff, it's subjective.
Agreed.
And so we, in looking at similar developments around, we felt like that we were in keeping with the development patterns in the area, and staff seemed to be on board with that as well.
I mean, to Mr. Bird's point, how many of the acres would have been required regardless? I mean, the acres that are being left would have been, engineered structures that would have been required for stormwater.
I'm not certain how many there would be, but we obviously do not have to provide retention ponds as a feature for the development. You can go with dry ponds. We can go with other types of stormwater features to reduce the size of those features. It's not required for us to provide any kind of clubhouse or anything like that within the development. And some of the stormwater facilities are not on community space that, once the development engineering design takes place, may. And yeah, 12%, the number I think is 7.5, a little over 7.5 acres. It's around 13 to 14%. But again, that's just a little bit here or there. And like I said, I mean, you've got a significant amenity in your walking paths and things like that that's buffered, and your landscape buffers are not, especially around the perimeter, are not included in the green space, because those are just buffers, easements on individual properties. So you do have, I would say, more green items, so trees, a substantial amount of trees that aren't incorporated within that green space that we're including as well. So,
Mr. Lyle, I want to just maybe take a different track with some questions. What's the average lot frontage on your single family detached?
So there's a mix between 50-foot width and 60-foot width.
Okay, and under the county subdivision requirements in an R1, just with forgetting the PUD, which is what's dictating the open space requirement, right? I'm right on that.
Yes, sir.
The R1 base zone, what would the minimum lot frontages be?
I'm pretty sure it's 60 foot, 7,500 square foot minimum.
That was changed. R1 on sewers is 50 foot of frontage and 6,000 square foot.
Okay, so I just clarifying that I think, I think you're not saying this, I'm saying this. You tell me if I'm wrong. What's the reason for the PUD request? I mean, your lot sizes are almost the same. It's the
addition of the townhouse.
The addition of the townhouses.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what's triggering the open space requirement is the desire to add townhomes.
Yes.
The point has been made that townhomes oftentimes are put in areas where there's higher density and those sorts of things. I also think that townhomes can be used for other reasons in and around our county besides just access to, higher density areas. So I think price point is one of the primary drivers, and that isn't necessarily pro forma driven as much as it is just adding a greater diversity of housing type.
Correct.
So we end up with more diverse communities in terms of the economics inside those communities when we have diversity of lot sizes. A PUD, for better or worse, is one of the only ways to incorporate, economic diversity inside a community. So just as for example, a single family detached lot in this subdivision has a house on it, and that house sells for what?
I think it's going to start from 450 to 475.
And a townhome?
Roughly 300,000.
So it's $150,000 difference, which ultimately allows for just, a different range of buyers, which I personally think has a pretty positive impact on traffic and those sorts of things too. Townhomes can really positively impact traffic in a way that single family detached doesn't, just because, I'm no traffic engineer, but if you fill a neighborhood with single family detached, then that has one type of buyer that more than likely is, looks a certain way and all leaves the subdivision at the exact same time, where when you have townhomes, you might have some elderly people or single people or,
Right.
families without kids, those sorts of things that might have different schedules and have lower impact on traffic. So those are just some of my thoughts in regards to how townhomes are leveraged inside these developments.
Mr. Chairman, if I could also just say, in addition to the need to sort of address PUDs and put some different standards in there so there's a little more consistency, I would also say that we were about to begin a market study of city and the county. There was a market study probably done about 5 years ago. But again, we're going to focus very much on what's the available housing that's been constructed, what are the price points or housing that we see today, both rental and for sale, what's the job profile that we have in this county in terms of what incomes and things that we see. There's just really not a good way for us as staff to kind of think about the big picture on some of this without a lot of good data. And so I'd say our inclination right now is to try to make more housing available. I mean, I think we all, just on the prices he just said, those are pretty high prices for a house or a townhome with current interest rates. And so, I mean, I guess without better tools, we have been more inclined to try to allow a diversity of housing and as much as we can try to hit, closer to what we think is a starter home even price. I don't think we're anywhere close to that with this project.
Mr. Broom?
I'm actually kind of prepared to make a motion. I just, out of respect to the folks that showed up in opposition today, I think turn lane was mentioned. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just relative to this development, I think it's compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. I'm somewhat familiar with that area and agree with what you said, Mr. Chair, and Dan, you as well. So I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation, but with respect to the folks that showed up in opposition, what are the next steps relative to the traffic study? I know that's time consuming. I can't block this for a traffic study, but how do we go about maybe trying to prioritize that or something?
I'll let maybe Todd wants to correct me if I'm wrong. This will require a traffic study anyway because of the number of lots. We'll do it if approved through the zoning and the PUD. Next steps will be for them to submit a preliminary plat for review. And then after that, they'll go into now the county has a land disturbing permit phase, where I believe at that stage, the traffic study will be submitted for county engineering's review. Is that somewhat correct, Todd? Is that how that goes?
Yeah, that's correct. It's part of the permitting process.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a recommendation to approve the staff recommendation.
Should we approve with staff recommendations or our conditions?
I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Where did they go? Yep. I read through these and I don't know that we discussed them a ton, right? But I don't have an issue with the proposed zoning conditions. So unless there are any objections from my fellow commissioners, I'd make a recommendation that we approve with this proposed zoning conditions from the applicant.
Yeah, 1 second. We've got a motion and a second to approve with the applicant's conditions. Go ahead, Mr. Burr.
Is condition 5? Do you have the list of the applicants?
I do.
Is condition 5 enforceable under city zoning staff?
Typically,
Sorry,
that would
county zoning staff.
Typically, that would, I'll defer to Todd, it's under his staff. Typically, those would be deed restrictions. The applicant, normally conditions are related to a nuisance and not necessarily a design issue. These are all design oriented, typically are done through deed restrictions. If the applicant is willing to propose that, I think it does put Todd's staff in a hard position trying to enforce those.
Let me just say from a regulatory authority, I appreciate, I have it circled here and I was going to try to at least make an objection, if not now, before county commission. It should be a covenant restriction somewhere in the deed. Single family homes, unless they're over 5,000 square feet, they don't even submit plans. And so it puts a really burden on the regulatory authority that's doing a house inspection when they're trying to get a CO and somebody's arguing about a facade. So I would recommend that not be a zoning condition, any type of construction. They're required to meet the building code and they probably have a certain market that they're trying to sell to. And if they want to control things like facades and column sizes and fencings, that should be done in a deed restriction.
Mr. Vern.
Yeah. So Todd, your recommendation would be to strike number 5?
Yes.
Okay. I'm okay with that. So I would amend.
Who seconded that? Okay. So we have an amended motion to approve the zoning request, which is case 2022-0251 with the applicant's proposed zoning conditions having struck number 5. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Lyle, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And then item 4 on our agenda under new business is case 2022-0252. And this is the PUD request. We've already heard from staff. We've heard from the applicant. We've heard from opposition. We do need to take action on it. What's the will of the commission?
The conditions you just approved was on the zoning. The PUD had one condition being proposed with staff, but I'm just looking at the condition. The condition is covered under the zoning of about a 40-foot setback from the exterior boundary.
Okay. All right. Very good.
So just to be consistent, I'll probably carry that condition on through.
Move to approve with condition.
We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case on the agenda, item 5, case 2022-0254. It's located at 1820 and 1824 Jenkins Road and 3 unaddressed in the 1800 block of Pine Street. And it's an application to rezone from R1 and R5 to RTZ. And staff is recommended to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Do you have any issue with the conditions? Thank you. We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral, case 2022-0257. And this is located in the 1400 block of Judd Road and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0258, and this is located at 1001 Macaulay Avenue, and it's an application to rezone from C3 with conditions to UCX5 urban commercial mixed use, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Mr. Schultz.
Sure. This is case 2022-258. This is a request to rezone a portion of this site from C3 with conditions to UCX5 urban commercial mixed use zone. Proposed use is multifamily residential. As part of this portion being rezoned, it's 0.6 acres in size, 10 units. That's a density of 16.6. However, this is being added to the larger project that's already zoned UCX5 or 4. This is just an extension of that request. It's a vacant piece of property. It's 1001 Macaulay Avenue, the corner of Central Avenue and Oak Street. Here's a view of the site. Adjacent to the site along O'Neill. Another view of the site. This is north of the site. Again, more single family attached dwellings. This is south of the site, which is a convenience store. East of the site. This is west of the site. Again, this is the downtown plan, which again doesn't really provide any land use plan recommendations, but it does encourage a diverse mixture of uses to support transit systems and pedestrian activities in this general area. The request is compatible with downtown plan housing goals. It is compatible with adjacent land uses and development form. Recommend to approve. If you look on the site plan here, majority of this site's already zoned UCX5. They're asking to rezone this red square portion here from C3 with conditions to UCX5 to make it zoning consistent. So staff recommended to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right. Okay, we'll hear from the opposition.
My name is Sandra Brower, 1001 Oak Street. I wasn't aware that the rest of the development was already approved. I'm just realizing that it's been approved and it's just a piece of the parcel. I own a triplex right across the street from this development, right on the corner of Oak Street and Central Avenue. My biggest concern is street parking. This is an old home. I rely entirely on street parking. Since it's the first time I'm knowing about this project, I'm just not sure how this will affect the parking for the surrounding properties when we don't have any other source of parking.
Thank you, ma'am. What are the parking requirements in CX5?
And it looks like they're showing on-site parking for these units.
They're garage parked.
Yeah.
And what's the requirement?
I'm looking for that.
Is there any guest parking or anything like that? Can you come up to the mic?
My name is Peter Romano with Bello Associates. We're civil engineers that represent RPA Homes. There is no guest parking on the site. All parking is in garages. You can see beneath the townhomes. So there's no on-street parking, or there would be just wherever they can park on the street. But the intention is that the parking is within the townhomes.
Okay.
Yeah, based on the form-based code, it's 0.5 per unit up to 2 bedrooms and 0.25 per additional bedroom, 20 max for this is multi-unit living, group living type uses.
So I'm assuming that would be not addressed at the zoning level, ma'am. The parking requirements that they have to meet would have to be met prior to getting any building permits, but we wouldn't necessarily be addressing that on the zoning side. You've got a land disturbance permit.
Correct.
No building permits yet?
No.
Okay. So when they get their building permits, they're going to have to meet all the parking requirements.
And I'm assuming there could be guest parking behind the units, behind the existing garages. I can't really tell from the site plan.
What's the width of that drive?
It's about, I think, probably 24 feet.
So that's all fire lanes.
Correct.
So there is, the way this plan reads, there is no guest parking.
Correct. Parking, I believe they park on both sides of the street currently.
Okay. Thank you. What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is case 2022-0259, and this is located at 4065 Kane Lane, and it's an application to rezone from R1 to RT1. It has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Mr. Schultz.
Sure. This is case 2022-259. This is a request to rezone from R1 residential to RT1 residential townhouse zone. It's roughly 25 acres in size. Proposed number of units is 168. It's a density of 6.6. Again, proposed use of this property is townhomes. I was looking at the zoning map. To the north of this property is R4. To the south and west is R1 residential. To the east is R1 residential. Then you have manufacturing zone. There's been no recent zoning history for this particular piece of property. There is some RT1 zone property about 1.5 miles away from the site on west of the site on Greenwood Drive. Here's an aerial view showing land uses. To the north in that R4 zone is multifamily. To the west of the site is the South Chick Greenway, which is vacant. To the south is a single family dwelling. To the east is single family, and then southeast is industrial office type uses. There is a floodway and floodplain associated with this property, which the applicant is not developing. You'll see on the site plan in a few minutes. It's roughly developing the front portion of this site and staying out of the floodway and floodplain to the west or rear of the site. Here's a view of the site. Another view of the site. Another view of the site, and this is the greenway that's on the site, South Chick Greenway extension. This is one of the single-family dwellings that is on Kane Lane. This is Kane Lane looking south. The site's just on the right-hand side. This is east of the site. There's some industrial uses. This site is located approximately 1,800 feet to the west of Shalford Road, which is the urban principal arterial. The site is on city sewer, has access to the South Chick Greenway. This development could provide workforce housing for the neighboring industrial businesses located along Airport Road, Shalford Road, and Cromwell Road. This zone, RT1, would also act as a transitional use and zone from adjacent R4 and in M1 industrial uses and the R1. Staff is also recommending a condition to align with a medium density in the RT1. So staff recommends to approve with a condition, a maximum density of 7 dwelling units per acre, because based on the current R21 zone, you could have a density of approximately 32. So staff is recommending a condition to limit that density. So staff recommends to approve with a condition. Here's the site plan that was submitted with the request. To the west or rear of the site, you can see pretty much half of this site, a little bit more than this site, is being preserved because of the floodway and floodplain. And therefore, the townhome development is moved to the east along Kane Lane. So staff recommends approve with a condition of density.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself from this case.
Okay.
Step out.
Thank you. Mr. Farmer, it's good to see you.
The chairs back there are not near as comfortable as the chairs up here, let me say. It's good to be back. Jason Farmer, Riverstone Construction. I was a little surprised. I had some opposition being where this site is. Brian, can you pull the site plan back up, please? There's a Kane Lane. There's a curve in Kane Lane back towards where the Greenway is. So if you keep moving your cursor up, Brian, there's a Kane Lane takes a pretty sharp curve back towards Jersey Pike. And there's that's where my industrial neighbors will be. And I think I've got one neighbor that's a little concerned that I'm going to be providing traffic issues into Kane Lane during hours where they have shift changes and that type of thing. So we moved the entrance so it's not around that curve right there. So for the safety of people that are going to be living there that we're going to be building for, we try to stay away from the curve. So there's a very healthy sight line right there. You could pull out and take a right and end up over by Airport Road and Shallowford Road. You could take a left and get back to Shallowford Road or Jersey Pike. So there's a lot of options for ingress and egress out of here. There's 168 units. We certainly don't see that as a problem. We have a lot of these, and I'm in there at all times of the day. And one thing I know is everybody doesn't leave at the same time, and everybody doesn't come at the same time. So with that, I'll just leave it up to the opposition. We just really don't see a big issue with traffic on this site.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I failed to mention, we did receive one email in opposition, which may be the same guy that's here today. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
We'll hear from the opposition.
I'm Bill Horton. I was retained by Sulzer, SULZER, Hunts, USINC. They're in the corner of that curve and King Road. It's an 8-acre tract that was zoned industrial approximately 20 years ago. They've been there ever since. They have 50 employees. You come in and out of that facility in the morning around 8 o'clock, and they leave about 4:30 to 5. They also have a lot of trucks come in and out of that location for deliveries, and they also furnish a lot of maintenance and repair for the nuclear plant at Sequoia. So they have to service that sometimes at night. What they're concerned about is not necessarily opposition, but they're concerned about how the entry point out of this development would impact their entry point into their facility. That's the number one issue. Perhaps a deferment where they could discuss this with the staff and Jason would be appropriate. I'll talk to Jason about that idea. The second point that they have is they're probably going to expand their facility and add more employees. And they don't want to be trying to do that and have 158 people come in and say, well, we don't like what you're doing. We don't like it. You're increasing the activity in an industrial site near our entrance. And we certainly want to prevent that risk in the future if we expand this facility and add more than the 50 employees we already have. Those are the concerns more than, I guess, opposition. Any questions?
Thank you. Mr. Farmer.
Again, I've talked about the safety issues. I think that we'll be fine there. Let me say, I can't say after we build 168 townhomes what those people are going to be for or against. I can certainly say that I'm not against any future rezoning that they may have there. And you can put me on record for that. This is workforce housing we're building. My average townhouse starts at $239,000. We feel like this is a real need right here, and I'm building blue collar workforce housing. I've got to put it somewhere, and this seems like a good spot. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Mr. Farmer, you're fine with the conditions, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, the density cap there. What's the will of the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I had
Mr. Matthews.
one comment or question, I guess, for the staff. One of the opposition that said about the increase more the size of the workforce, but that would not require additional zoning. Aren't they already zoned for M1? Is that the property we're talking about?
Yeah, I'm not sure what property you're talking about. If it is the one to the south, it is all zoned M1 or M2, I guess it is. So it wouldn't involve any rezoning. It'd just be a matter of going through building permits for expansion of their building. If they go across the street, yes, that would require rezoning. But on their property now, it looks like all that's zoned M2.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve with condition.
We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0260. And this is Tyler Smith with an application to rezone 66, 20, 24, 28, 36, 40, and 44 Sandwich Road. And it's to lift and amend conditions and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Okay. And is the applicant present? Mr. Schultz, we've got several hands here in opposition and an applicant present, and I'd like for you to take us through this case.
Sure, and we did receive a lot of emails in opposition to this as well. You may remember this case. This came back to a rezoning to the Planning Commission, I guess, back at the start of the summer. This request was rezoned back in the summer to RTZ. There was some conditions placed on this property. So now the applicants are coming forward to lift and amend conditions of ordinance number 13821. Again, it's currently zoned to RTZ. Proposed number of acres is 4.88. Proposed units is 20. That's a density of 4. As stated back in 2022, case 91, this property was rezoned from R1 to RTZ with 4 conditions. Detached single-family residential use only, no more than 32 residential lots, a 30-foot undisturbed buffer provided along Delmont Lane. Delmont Lane is just to the right of this red square, and no access to Delmont Lane. Again, Delmont Lane is this cul-de-sac to the east of this site. The applicant wishes to amend condition number 1, which read detached single-family uses only, to amend condition number 1 to include 0 lot line homes, and add to condition number 2, basically taking the number of units from 32 to 20. So it'd be a reduction in the number of units from 32 to 20. So again, the applicant wants to amend condition number 1 to add to add 0 lot line homes, and condition number 2 to reduce the number of units from 32 to 20. The applicant wishes to lift condition number 3 and 4. Number 3 is, again, a 30-foot landscape buffer along Delmont Lane, and then no access to Delmont Lane. The applicant wishes to lift that condition. Here's a view of the site. It's quite hilly as you come off of Sandswitch Road into the site. Another view of the site. This is the site just beyond the stop sign, just showing you some of the adjacent single family. This is some of the adjacent single family that's off Delmont Lane. Staff recommended to approve lifting and amending the conditions. At the same time, screen went off here. At the same time, staff wishes to add condition number 3. So the recommendation is to approve the applicant's request with the following conditions. Number 1, detached single-family residential and 0 lot line units only. No more than 20 residential lots. Again, those 2 are what was requested by the applicant. And staff is recommended to add a new condition number 3, ingress and egress from Sandswitch Road is prohibited. That way we'd force all the traffic to come into this site from Delmont Lane. The applicant did provide, request us show this site plan. Here is what the site was originally going to be developed back in, I think, 2008. Then the economy hit and never took off. You can see Delmont Lane. There was proposed connection to come through off of that and into Sandswitch. Here's a Google Street View. You can see just beyond this street sign, that's the current road from Sandswitch. It goes back into the site. This is the previous site plan that was submitted to the case back in during the rezoning. It did show a access point off Sandswitch coming back into basically a hammerhead turnaround with no connection to Delmont, and then a landscape buffer being provided, 30-foot undisturbed landscape buffer along this Delmont Lane property line. This is a revised site plan the applicant has submitted with the revised conditions, removing that connection to Sandswitch, again reducing the number of units from 32 to 20, but then also providing a connection to Delmont Lane and therefore reducing the buffer. So shifting the homes out of the steep slope area into the more level part of this site. So staff recommended to approve amending and lifting the conditions, but adding a new condition.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Brian, I've got I don't know if it's a question about the wording or the substance of this, but I made the note when I was going through the packet last week. If I'm looking at the conditions rather, one of them lists it's on the screen here. It says detached single-family residential and 0 lot line uses only, units uses only. I don't know if that's somebody trying to avoid saying the word townhomes because that's a dirty word to some people, even though it shouldn't be. It's just a house where people live. But, it's my understanding that in the RTZ zone, you're allowed, townhomes can be between 0 and 1.5 feet off the line, but can also be 5 feet or more off the property line. And I wonder, this particular project may not be calling for a 5 foot, but it's possible that in the future we're zoning this land in perpetuity after it's sold. So it's possible that somebody may want to build 5 feet off the property line. I don't want to restrict that unnecessarily.
I think last time there was some opposition to townhomes, and if you look at the original condition, it said just single family, but the intent was also to do 0 lot line. And I think
Which
it was
are still single family.
Which are still single family. There was some confusion from codes enforcement of what single family attached meant versus 0 lot line. So we've had discussions. If you'll see most of our conditions moving forward, if it's single family detached in a zone that allows 0 lot lines, we're adding that as a use so there's no confusion from LDO on what is single family detached.
It may be better to say no townhomes.
Well, that's more of a philosophical question, but 0 lot line units would include townhomes.
No, just they would not be attached.
Okay.
There's 3 different.
You have in this zone, you have single family, 0 lot line, and then townhomes.
Okay.
This is basically a patio home, if you will, the 0 lot line.
That's what I was going to call it. Either a patio home, it's just offsetting everyone so it hugs the other property, as you can see in the site plan.
And that was the intent on the original. If you look on the original site plan, it did show 0 lot line units. It just, I think there's a difference of opinion from codes enforcement what single family detached truly meant.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? We'll hear from the applicant.
What month was this rezoning?
Oh, gosh, I'm thinking April, May of this year.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Oh, it seems.
So, after you get rezoned and you start to jump into all the details of the project and, take a deep dive, the main issue that we ran into was we really wanted to try to make a sand switch entrance work because of the neighbors and opposition. One of the requirements, which you don't see on this site plan, is you have to, if there's another street adjacent, you have to meet it directly across, and titanium ties right into where our proposed entrance was, which actually would move our entrance so close to the property lines to the south that with the contours and with the having to make that alignment and road condition maximum slopes, it's impossible to bring an entrance off of that because the retaining wall that we'd have to build would have to encroach safely to build it, would have to encroach on the property, the people's property, and I'd have to get an easement or purchase that property. So coming off of Sand Switch didn't look like it. Our engineers are like, that's pretty much a scratch. So when I'm going back to the drawing board and I have to come back and meet with everybody again, I'm like, well, what is an appropriate use? So if we have to come off Belmont, I did a 40% reduction in the amount of units that we would be providing on the site. It would also allow us to stay off of the steeper contours, which I think is why staff has recommended the third, which is the Hickson North River plan, which wants to keep its natural goals to protect steep slopes and even add more green space, which I don't have an issue with. But since I had we had a meeting last week with the residents, and their concern is obviously just construction traffic coming through their neighborhood and I can, I understand that. And the reason I had asked staff to include the extra drawing to show back in 2008 that there is an existing road that was proposed, and actually it's there. And after the recommendations and concerns of having so much heavy equipment and construction stuff coming through their neighborhood, I went proactively, met with subcontractors. We went to the site. We walked the road coming up off of Sand Switch. That is like I would say a service road. And I think we'll be able to use that for the entirety of most of the like heavy, like land disturbance part of the development. So, I just don't want to be cut off if like I'm trying to make the best of both worlds, right? Like I got the neighborhood, I got the staff, I got all these things. So like I'm just trying to like, where's the good compromise? Like what can we do to, move forward with building on this site, adding some homes to the neighborhood, and then keeping everybody happy too. So my proposal would be to lift also the condition that they added and be able to, number 3, and let us bring the majority of our construction equipment, any large like dump trucks and all that stuff that would be hauling stuff off of the site. Let's use that construction entrance, get the majority of the neighborhood in, ready to go, and then we could open up to Delmont at that point.
Thank you. Could you state your name and address?
Tyler Smith.
Thank you.
And 1025 to Chattanooga Road, Hickson, Tennessee.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Maybe.
I guess let's start with Steph. Would the condition that y'all had on there, number 3, prohibit a construction entrance, or is that just a permanent like ingress egress?
I think it's permanent. We probably need to be clear for LDO's perspective. What does that mean? Because it says ingress and egress from Sand Switch is prohibited. That could be meant to be also construction. You could add except for temporary construction or something like that to that condition if you so choose.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. And so just to clarify, your proposal is just you don't want permanent access onto Sand Switch, is that it?
I don't want, like, it would be different if it wasn't already existing, right? Like if we're going to go in and tear out greenscape and do all that. I also don't want to like shoot myself in the foot if like retention ponds need a serviceable entrance or something like that, then I already have existing infrastructure that's in place that could service that. I would prefer to, eliminate that third condition. It's not like I'm adding, like, it's not like I'm going in there and taking it out. It's already there.
I didn't catch the fact that, why did staff prohibit that?
Well, one, trying to protect the steep slopes, and then we're thinking that was the whole purpose of wanting to connect to Delmont, stay off steep slopes. Why would you have another access point off of Sand Switch?
Gotcha.
Shifting everything back would prohibit that.
Okay.
But I think based on what I'm hearing now, if it's a service drive for the detention ponds, that may not just be for temporary. That's what I understood.
But your thought is your paved road that residents are going to be accessing the project would be not coming off Sand Switch.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? We've got a handful of people here in opposition that want to speak. I'm assuming if you're here and you're in opposition and you want to speak, come on up to the mic.
Thank you.
Make sure to state your name and address for the record. Is there anybody else that wants? If anybody wants to speak, go ahead and come up now so that. Okay, that's great.
Okay, my name is Carolyn Taylor. I'm at 433 Delmont Lane. So I am the last home in the cul-de-sac at the top of the hill adjacent to this property. And he should have on record there my email in opposition with a list of the homeowners that
we do.
Okay. And I guess what we're back to, since we lost our first opposition, we didn't want the rezoning because we knew this was going to happen. this fight over property on top of this hill. How are you going to get to it? So it looks like we're going back to the opposition of, please don't open Delmont Lane. Don't open our small neighborhood. These pictures are not an accurate representation. In order to get to this property from Sandswitch, you're going to turn right on Brookmont, which is the shortest route. You're going to go up Brookmont, another sharp turn to Hillbrook, and another sharp turn to Delmont before you even get to the top of the hill to get to this property. So, which brings up another point. If this is open, these people that buy the new homes, I don't know what the price is. We've been told anywhere from $300, $320, $350. You're going to be driving through a neighborhood of older homes that were built in the 70s that go through our little neighborhood into this neighborhood of $300,000 homes. What's that going to do to our property? You know, I guess that's my main concerns. I don't understand why there was an immediate recommendation to go with just forget the Sandswitch ideal. Let's do Delmont. Why couldn't he change his access road? He talks about the plan from 2008. I have one from 2005 that was approved that has a sloped road into this property. It goes in and makes a turn again to get to the top of the hill, and that's where the homes were. And I can provide you with that. So that's really all I have to say is just, please consider our neighborhood. Small roads. We have kids in the neighborhood. There's parking on the street. Because truthfully, this access from Sandswitch with construction equipment has been tried before. And they say, oh, it's too steep. The previous plan wasn't even going to allow garbage trucks to go up that road. So I just ask for consideration before a final decision is made. Please, someone come drive through our neighborhood and look what, it looks nothing like that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Neil Hoff. I live at 6610 Hillbrook Lane, which is in this housing subdivision. Of course, we are asking that you do not allow them to open the cul-de-sac for a variety of reasons. One, as she stated, our roads are narrow. We have one side street parking. You cannot pass two cars by each other with one car parked there. You have to kind of wait for that car to go by. They want to take and use our subdivision, which was purchased by everybody that bought it, as a closed cul-de-sac subdivision. No access, no through roads. This individual wants to build his homes. He says he can't access it from Sandswitch. There is an existing plan that says he can. The city should work with him to move his road a few feet to allow him to build in there without having to come through a family, residential, very quiet neighborhood and turn it into a driveway for his subdivision. You can go through multiple reasons why it shouldn't be put there. Traffic is one of them, and not just during the construction. It's going to be the people who live there. And secondly, if this man is given right to that cul-de-sac, we have another one at the other end of our subdivision that is under restriction not to be opened, and they're just waiting for an excuse to open that one. He gets his, they get theirs. And now we not only have his 20-some homes, we have their 50-some homes running through our subdivision. I don't know about any of you, but I don't care to make my driveway in front of my house a highway for somebody else's benefit.
I want to ask one quick question. Delmont Lane, is that a public city road or is that a private drive?
My understanding it's a public road.
Okay.
It's maintained by the city of Chattanooga.
That's a right of way.
Yes.
Okay. And do you know the width on it by any chance? Or
I don't. I'm just assuming if it meets the city standards, it'd be 50-foot right of way, 26 feet of
50
pavement.
right of way. We don't really know the pavement width.
I don't.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, you had a question?
Chairman, you asked my exact question. I wanted to know if this was in fact a private road that was maintained by private funds and could be closed off, or if it was in fact a public road paid for by the taxpayers.
Gotcha. Any other questions for staff or the opposition? All right, you're welcome to come back up.
Just some clarity on the access. I think I'd like to just keep that as a driveway to access the back lot. If that, so like obviously it wouldn't be an ingress, egress, public road coming off of Sand Switch, but a driveway that could be maintained for all the back area of the subdivision. If there's any other questions, happy to.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hill.
So I know a great deal about District 2, and in District 2, about all we have are steep slopes. So when I hear people want to not build on a steep slope, I think that's a great idea. As I'm looking at this plan and thinking about, like you're asking about potentially keeping a drive off of Sand Switch to access the retention ponds, which are going to be at the bottom of the hill, looks like with these topo lines, right?
At the top.
They're at the top.
Yeah, that's a ridge line that runs.
So you're coming up a hill from Sand Switch.
Correct.
And you're going to have a retention pond at the top.
Correct.
Okay. So you're going to be disturbing the slope either way, and the road has already been cut to disturb the slope.
Correct.
That makes that argument a little less compelling to me. Okay, thank you.
What's the will of the commission? Mr. Maybe?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the staff's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion, and it has been seconded to approve the staff's recommendation with conditions. Any discussion?
Thank you, Chairman. A few minutes ago, somebody brought up the issue of condition number 3, and I know that Councilwoman Hill just referred to that in her question. That one gives me a little heartburn just for my one vote. And also it was brought up ingress, egress from Sand Switch. That's not very clear in the condition about if it just means for finished traffic once the neighborhood is built, or does that prohibit construction traffic from using it during construction?
I mean, we could clarify the language. It's meant to prohibit permanent access, exclude. I mean, you could, or either way, except for well, it's not temporary because he mentioned something about access to the detention ponds for maintenance.
Just
I'm not
access
sure how
to that back lot in general with an existing driveway that's already there.
I guess then I have a question to Mr. Maybe if he would accept an amendment of eliminating condition 3. Well, it's both. It's both. It's unclear about the time period in which ingress and egress would be prohibited, but also that slope's already been disturbed, and it's going to get disturbed some more no matter what this condition says.
I'm just curious if we could consider adding except for during construction period and for a service entrance only. That may be something that could be added. It doesn't really address the time period, but.
Councilwoman Hill.
I think the thing that stands out to me is the reality that the sand switch has already been cut. The slope has been disturbed. And to me, that makes this conversation largely moot, that why can we not go back to the original plan with some adjustments? I understand you've got some lining up to do, and I certainly am not. I like, if the whole point was to get access to a road because you couldn't get to it, and now we're talking about leaving a road there. It seems to me like we're really negatively impacting the people on Delmont Lane who have. I mean, we all know that the folks at the top of the hill are going to zoom. They're going to zoom, and if there's just already a road, I'm just not fully convinced.
I do wonder, and maybe the applicant can speak to it. There's a difference between that drive and a road. So there's. So what's there right now?
Right now is just about a 20-foot paved driveway entrance in, and then a conditioned driveway, right? Like gravel all the way up and through all the way to Delmont, like from Sand Switch all the way through the site through Delmont to Delmont, and we really wouldn't be doing anything else to it other than, if it.
Well, I think what Councilwoman Hill wants to know is why can't that be your road? You're saying you can't.
Because the city conditions for the maximum slope for a road changed again, I think now to 10%. Is it 12 or 10?
No, it's just 12% up to, and I think it's 15% up to like 300 foot maximum. The fire code has a 10%.
Okay.
That's been the fire code for years. That way, 10%. No,
the fire marshal can approve up to 15, but it's got to be extenuating.
Yeah, but there's nothing in the subregs now to say 10%.
So the ability, that road is probably at a 30%. And I need to stop calling it a road because it's not a road, it's a driveway. That driveway is at 30%. The maximum is 10 to 15. And that's why we can't use that as an entrance, because then we would be tearing up the entire hillside, which we're trying to preserve some of the site all the way down, all those big trees. So if you go look at the 2008 the whole top of the site was already wiped out. So it was that 2008. See, so it's already been basically our construction or where we plan on building is right where that area is already been graded and land disturbed. So what we're trying to do is to be helpful to the neighbors. We'll use the access road or the access driveway that, we can get equipment in and out to the majority of our project, and then just still have accessibility to it in case if there's things that need to happen on that back lot.
Mr. Anderson.
Let me attempt to clean this up with Mr. Baby. I'd like to amend my request for amendment to staff recommendation number 3 to add the words during construction. Not during construction, or not including during construction at the end of that, however staff wants to word it. Just to make it clear that Sand Switch can be used during construction of the neighborhood. If you would accept that.
Yeah. So I think it would make sense to me to have that access for maintenance purposes on the backside there. So in addition to that, for longer term, and I appreciate the conversation that's happened here. I am familiar with that site, and I think that while there is that drive there, I do believe there's a big difference between what that is and putting a city street in. And when we already have the city right away on top of the hill, I think it does make sense to come in from that direction. So that would be that is my line of thinking. But so just to clarify, the motion would be staff's recommendation with the additional verbiage on number 3 that me and Mr. Anderson just had.
Who seconded that? You did. You want to discuss this?
Yeah, just maybe like a quick call.
Sure.
Yeah. So just a couple of thoughts. I feel like maybe the residents. It's unfortunate. I know what you're going through. I know that's incredibly steep, and I don't know that you have a ton of other choices. This is tough change for them to digest. You're coming back 5 months later, basically, putting this street in through their cul-de-sac, and that stinks. Like, just let's call it what it is. But at the same time, we need this housing, right? Like, this is good, affordable housing, in my opinion. Just maybe asking you to look at units 1 and 20, maybe give them a little reprieve. You're right up on that cul-de-sac. If there's anything you can do to give them a little bit more room, if we are going to put that road there, there's another place you can put those. I mean, it's not my site plan, it's yours, but maybe that's something you can consider. So,
okay. Yeah, we'll definitely will.
We have 13 motions, 12 amendments, and 14 seconds.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? Does somebody who's taking minutes know exactly what it is that's happened here?
Yes.
Okay.
We do. We got it.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0261. And this is located at 612 Dodson Avenue and an unaddressed 600 block of Dodson Avenue. It's an application rezone from R2 to RTZ and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? What's the will of the commission?
Move to approve with conditions.
We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, did you notice the applicant was here?
I did not.
He was in.
Oh, okay. I didn't see. Did you have any issue with the conditions? That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mabey. I didn't see you. You were behind the monitor. Thank you, Mr. Mabey. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0262, and this is located at 7707 Lee Highway, and it's an application to rezone from C2 to UGC. And then we also have a case 12, which is 2022-0263, and this is located at 7717 Lee Highway, and it's an application to rezone from R1 and C2 to UGC. Staff is recommended to defer for 60 days. And is there one more?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there's one more, number 13.
Yep. And we have 2022-0264, and this is located at 3655 Cummings Highway, and it's an application rezone from R3 and C2 to UGC. Staff is recommended to defer all 3 of these cases 60 days. Is the applicant present? They thought you are the applicant. Okay. How do you feel about it being deferred for 60 days? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, also, we'll be bringing back probably in January an amendment to hopefully the C2 zone to allow the conversions of hotels to permanent housing. Really, these are going to UGC for a density issue. So you're having to rezone from C2 to UGC for the density requirements. Council's directed us, I think, to look at something on that conversion of the C2 amendment. That's another reason we're asking for a deferral. There may not be a need to rezone these come January, February.
Yes. Commissioner Graham. On all 3 or one in particular? Okay. Can we take action on the other 2 real quick? Is it number 14? 13? Sorry. On 2022-0262 and 22-0263, I'd entertain a motion to defer for 60 days.
Discussion, please.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer both for 60 days, and it was seconded. Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, Brian or Dan, in the last line of the last two lines of the staff recommendation, it says council plans on continuing that discussion at an upcoming strategic planning session. Staff recommends deferral up to 60 days pending the outcome of that planning session. When this staff report was written, that was accurate information. It is no longer accurate. At the city council meeting last week, Dan and I were tasked with putting together a working group for this purpose and take it off of the council strategic planning. So we are supposed to report back to council in January with something, but I think deferring this is fine, but I think if we say it's only going to take 60 days to get something on the books at council, we're not doing a service to the applicant, because it's going to take more than that. It's probably going to take at least 90.
Well, in 60 days, the applicant can say, I don't want to defer. I want you to take action on it.
Yeah, fair enough. I just wanted to point out that the situation has changed since the staff report was written. It's now going to be an internal process that reports back to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Graham. You are opposed? Okay. Well, we've deferred them for 60 days. So they'll be back on our agenda in 60 days. Both those cases. We didn't take any action to approve or deny those cases. And we don't have a staff recommendation. So Planning Commission's deferred those cases for 60 days. They'll be back on the agenda in February. Is that right, Brian? The February.
Yes, February 13th, 14th, something like that. Let me look at my calendar.
Commissioner Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you to all of you on the Planning Commission. I know that you're all volunteers, and it's a very difficult job, and you make a lot of people happy. You make a lot of people mad, and you can't help it, right? You got to make these decisions. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for your service to Hamilton County and the city of Chattanooga. We greatly do appreciate you. I'm here kind of wearing two hats today. I am the county commissioner, again, 2.0, I guess. But I am the county commissioner for District 11, but I'm also the neighborhood association president for Lookout Valley. And we brought this issue up. Thank you again to the Planning Commission. They always send all the neighborhood association presidents, letters and updates of things that are coming up. So I brought that letter to the neighborhood association this month and had a long discussion about this hotel being changed over, and we were adamantly, and we had several people in the room, several people on Facebook, and we were adamantly against this. We're terrified that we're going to end up with another situation like the Budgetel in East Ridge, and so we're adamantly against this. I know that there was another hotel that this was brought before your body in Brainerd, and it was turned down. We're asking you to turn it down. I understand the deferral, and I'll be back whenever the deferral comes back up, and I appreciate what Mr. Anderson's doing and what the city's trying to do. But even by changing the C2, we're still adamantly against this. And I'm speaking on behalf of a unanimous vote in the room and a unanimous vote across Facebook. So deferral is understood, but in this particular one, I can't speak to the other two. I didn't look at them, but in this particular one, they're all hotels around there with apartments up on top of the hill. So you'd actually be going through a hotel parking lot to get to an apartment. It not only doesn't make sense, but we have a real issue now. And I want to help the homeless, but we have a real issue with homeless camps in our community that are being driven out our way. And I don't see this as a benefit, neither does the neighborhood association. So we're, again, adamantly opposed to this. And I'll just have to come back in 60 days. Well, I won't be the neighborhood president. I hope we're going to have an election in January, so I won't be the neighborhood association president in after January, but I still will be the commissioner. So I will be coming back and expressing these views then as well. So while you all are considering this, please consider a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you come up to the mic and state your name and address for?
My name is Marco Botros, and I live at 3007 Country Lane. I do want to make a note, not only that there is neighborhood right pretty much touching the back of this lot. There is an academy, a Silverdale Academy. It's less than a fourth of a mile away. I don't recommend this whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. So for those of you who did come and sit through the whole meeting, if anybody else wishes to speak, you're welcome to speak. We're going to defer this case 13. We've got a staff recommendation to defer, and the other two have been deferred. But if you'd like to speak today, you're welcome to.
My name is Richard Williams, and I live at 3011 Country Lane. Esteemed commission members, I appreciate your time with this deferment. I do want to bring up on 7717, which is 0263, the portion in the back of that lot that is deemed residential right now is a creek. Okay, so as you blanket that all in, keep that in mind too. You know, you're talking about a waterway back there. Okay. Secondly, as it was mentioned, you know, we have a real housing issue. I work in providing affordable housing myself, so I'm near and dear to affordable housing. But turning motel rooms into efficiency apartments, it's not the answer. Okay, you're basically corralling. You're raising camps in downtown Chattanooga. You're raising those people. You're trying to move them, whether it be into Eastridge, and you know how that spectacularly failed in this community, and how that looked, and the egg that was on city of Chattanooga's face doing that. But now you're taking and you're trying to move them somewhere else, and you're doing it in our community. And as residents of Hamilton County, I don't think that's fair. You know, your homeless population's homeless. 99% of them are homeless, whether it be from mental issues or drug issues. Okay. And you're basically trying to corral them and put them in not my backyard. This is my backyard. Okay. I'm directly adjacent to 7717. I share that property with them. Okay. That section of woods behind 7717, it's a beautiful, pristine piece of woods. Okay. And I'm looking at my crystal ball, and my crystal ball says that as you move the homeless community to this area, that's going to become a homeless camp in my backyard. Okay. This is not the answer. The answer is addressing the root problems, and this is not the answer for affordable housing. And that's all I got to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else that showed up in opposition to those three cases wish to speak before we move on? Thank you for being here, and thank you for being willing to speak. I'd encourage you to come back when we plan to take action on them, which would be 60 days.
We need a motion on that third one.
We do.
Motion to defer.
Case 2022-0264. Did you say 60? Yeah. We have a motion to defer for 60 days, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. I'm going to step out for just a moment.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to case number 2022-248. It's located at 2314 East Main Street in the city of Chattanooga. The request is to rezone from C2 convenience commercial zone to C3 central business zone with conditions. Does have a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition? Applicant here, are you good with the conditions?
Second.
Okay. Have a motion to approve with conditions. It has been properly seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
I'm tempted to offer an amendment just to mess with you, but I won't.
Yeah. No amendments. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. The last item on the agenda for new business is mandatory referral 2022-249. It's an unopened alley in the 1500 block of South Lyerly Street in the city of Chattanooga. Has a staff recommendation to approve. Any opposition? Applicant. Okay. Have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Amendments and resolutions on the agenda. There are none. Staff updates. I believe Dan. Go ahead.
Emily's going to talk about real quick about form-based code, and then we got Eric Asbo here to talk about the Chattanooga subdivision regulations concerning street standards.
Thanks, Brian. So last month I gave a brief update about the 1-year form-based code edits that staff has been working on, and you all got a copy of our report with our findings and our recommendations. And since that last meeting, we had another public meeting. There were about 14 individuals there. Mostly it was people from the development community, but there were a few individuals from the MLK Neighborhood Association. And the general consensus from the meeting was that I think a majority of the participants agreed with staff's recommendations for the phase 1 updates. However, there was some opposition to removing the neighborhood meeting requirement. And so just for background, the neighborhood meeting requirement is required for any applicant in the form-based code boundary before they can apply for what they call a large project. So multifamily, residential, more than 5 units, or a commercial project, they have to meet with the neighborhood association before they can submit their development application. And so staff had received some comments about possibly removing that because it can provide some additional time and money involved for the development of the project if the applicant is not able to get on the neighborhood association meeting calendar. There's also was some comments brought up about how neighborhood association presidents change, or the groups, like the participants change, and so it can be difficult to coordinate that. So staff was recommending to remove the requirement, but then after the meeting, we also met with the form-based code committee, and their committee members agreed with the neighborhood to keep the requirement. So we're looking at potentially just changing the language to make it so that the applicants have to host a neighborhood meeting, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that they go to the neighborhood association meeting, if that makes sense. So we wanted to get your opinion on how you felt about that topic in particular, because that seemed to be the biggest one where there was opposition, and also give you the opportunity if you want to discuss any of our other updates. And I have some slides if you need me to go through them, but for the sake of time, if you don't need me to, I won't do that.
Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you're looking for just some general feedback, I live in one of the form-based zones there, and I can attest to the difficulty of just getting anybody to go to one of those meetings. I mean, if it's a major project that's going to have huge implications, then sometimes you can get some interest. But other than that, it's them calling and hounding every former president of the association that they can even think of, just trying to get somebody there. So I think that is an issue. I appreciate y'all working to address that.
Thank you, Chris. Another thing too that was part of the staff recommendation that I forgot to mention is that for any other type of construction related project, so whether it's rezoning, Board of Zoning Appeals variance, a building permit, a subdivision plat, they don't require neighborhood meetings before somebody can apply either. So we were trying to just be consistent. Although with rezoning, staff does encourage the applicant to host a meeting at some point during the process. It's not a codified requirement, and they have more flexibility that they can do it anytime, essentially before it gets through city council. So about 2 to 3 months. Whereas in this case, the person cannot even apply to get their project reviewed by staff until they've had that meeting. And Sarah Robbins, the form-based code staff planner, has already been using a little more discretion to say that because of these hurdles, as long as they have proof of they met with a neighborhood, even if it wasn't at their actual neighborhood meeting, she's counting that. So basically, if we did modify it, we would just be making it more consistent with what she's already doing.
And we had talked about they could also host a meeting at the DRC in the afternoons or evenings. Just you stop by, not in a particular neighborhood, you send notices out. You go be at the DRC from 5 to 7 on such a date to talk about a project to make it easier.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation. I mean, we did hear from some citizens that this was, big deal to eliminate it. But to me, just standardize it. Just say 1 day a month, we're going to have these neighborhood meetings from 2 to 5 for all of the requests. And if nobody shows up, then nobody shows up. I just think, it's going to be a big deal if we try to remove it entirely. So.
I'll point out that most of the downtown neighborhoods don't meet every month. And we're talking about areas in the form. I mean, mine doesn't. I think if you're looking for in the areas where you'd have these big projects, they literally don't have a monthly neighborhood meeting. So I appreciate you guys working on that.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that were there, they were pretty adamant. But that's why their form-based code was those neighborhood meetings. They didn't want it removed. So it was Dan's right. It's going to be pretty hard to stay on, remove it altogether.
Yeah, makes sense.
I can make one comment. I think it is very important that the neighborhood associations at least be notified ahead of time. I think that absolutely needs to be a requirement. As to having a meeting, I understand the hurdles, and I think that's fine.
And so for our notification process isn't changing if this neighborhood meeting requirement is modified or goes away. For rezoning, adjacent property owners are notified and signs are posted and it's in the newspaper and on our website. And that is the same for form-based code committee modifications, as well as Board of Zoning Appeal variances. The only thing that I don't know is I don't believe adjacent property owners are notified for every single project in the form-based code, which is similar to building permits. If somebody applies for a building permit, adjacent property owners are not notified. They just have a sign posted out in front of the property, which would be the same.
Anybody else have any questions or want to?
I have a number of other comments about the rest of the form-based code amendments. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it up to you if this is the appropriate forum for that, or I should follow up separately.
I think it is.
In the interest of time.
Are we going to be expected to take action on this?
Not today.
This
Next month.
That's up to
When will it be on our
up to
agenda
Planning
for
Commission. We heard at the meeting in terms of form-based code, and then our next agenda item, the subdivision street standards, was that those that are participating had asked for more review time, especially with the holidays and things like that. So I don't know that there's a rush per se. So it's pretty much, I think, when you guys are ready for us to move it forward as an actual ordinance amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask on the form-based code, if not the subdivision regs, if we have some enthusiastic people to go through the report and give us a recommendation on what y'all think we should maybe, how quickly we should move on some of these different items. Because we could come back obviously next month and bring it to the Planning Commission, and we'd have to advertise it. It would still be 60 days before we get anything approved. But we would like to move forward and just make some amendments to the form-based code. If because again, I think we want to make sure the community, and not just the community, development community, architects, other folks have been heard. We've heard a number of concerns, I guess, about form-based code in general. But I think maybe if we get some specific direction from whoever wants to help us, that would be good. Otherwise, we'll just go. I think that's what Emily intended to do, was just all those amendments that she had. Is the first section of stuff. I forget what you call it.
Just phase one and phase
phase
2.
1 and phase 2. She would work on phase 1, bring that in for review by the Planning Commission and City Council. Once that's adopted, we come back and do phase 2. But I mean, that doesn't necessarily have to go that way. If y'all felt like there were some things in phase 2 that were important, we could try to move those to the top.
Any aspect of that could be, if we did want to see this on the agenda in 60 days, we would go through these, and any aspect of these that we didn't want to take action on, we could pull out.
Sure.
Okay.
And the other thing to keep in mind too, is part of the reason the phase 2 was designated as that, is that they require more public input, more discussion with elected officials. It was brought up at the public meeting last month that, some of these bigger changes might tie into other changes in the other parts of the zoning ordinance. So we need to make sure that they're coordinated, which is why we would also want to wait on those so that we can see what sort of updates will happen with the whole zoning code ordinance rewrite with our consultants, Camero. So there's a lot of other factors involved, which is why we were suggesting to continue to work on that. Whereas the phase 1 were more administrative mostly, and we felt that those could move forward quicker.
In the interest of time, then I have one very specific comment for the phase one, and then two very broad comments for the phase two. For phase one, and I'm just going off of the summary. I haven't gotten a chance to look at the actual text, but it says revised driveway width and setback in urban edge district to meet fire and life safety minimums of 22 feet wide. Is there a reason that's limited to the urban edge district? It seems to me like that should be form-based code.
We looked at form-based code modifications, and most of the ones that had gone through modifications were in the urban edge. So that's why we did that. But if Planning Commission feels otherwise, that's something we could look at for the rest of form-based code.
I think in general, that's something I've run into as a designer multiple times, is having a 20-foot driveway and the fire marshal comments on it, and then we go in circles for a little while. It goes half, there's no consistency really to it, but I think just in the interest of keeping things consistent between departments, I think that should be 22 feet throughout. And then I've got two more broad comments.
So again, we're not going to bring anything back to y'all until, well, we would probably bring it back in 30 to 60 days with that phase one changes, so that we can adopt those. But again, if y'all want to give us more specific input on the whole report, I think that's fine too.
And two more broad comments. Use is a very large part of a ostensibly form-based code here in Chattanooga, and it just seems rather odd to me that we're calling it a form-based code, but the use table is huge and very restrictive, and it seems like we need I think there should be less emphasis on use in a form-based code. And then my last comment is that is there any conversation or consideration of consolidating this? We've got 32 zones, and some of them are 99% the same. It is incredibly redundant.
We have talked to Kamiros.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Our
Okay.
consultant said that too, and they're actually giving us recommendations.
Good.
And
Okay.
one of their recommendations, I believe, will be how to consolidate better. But that would be, again, sort of the phase two.
Right.
Yes. Mhm. And I don't know, like what Dan said, how you all want to do it, but if you have individual comments that you want to send to me via email, if you want to mark up the document that way, I'm happy to accept those like that. Or if you want to get together and submit one thing, like Dan said, either way, we just want to get everybody's comments, and so we're flexible.
Would it make sense? And I mean, I know everybody's busy, and December is certainly not the time to do it, but would it make sense to have a meeting much like this that's open to the public for us to go through them, one at a time, take any comment and take action, go through the next one, take comment,
maybe later,
take action.
Later in January.
Mm-hmm. Just because, I mean, I think the challenge is that, I think we're all to some degree experts, but then we've got expert opinions of, developers and engineers and architects. And then of course there's all the public input that's certainly relevant, and elected officials. And so there's really, every one of these changes, well, I don't want to say every one of them, but a lot of them are really complicated and can have pretty significant impacts. We just want to make those decisions in such a way that, it really does work well for everybody. I wonder if we couldn't just have one additional meeting in the month of February to cover. And then I also have a feeling that some of these subdivision regulations aren't going to need to maybe look the same way, where there's an additional meeting, it's open to the public, and we can work through them one at a time and take action on them.
You were proposing February versus January?
January or February.
Okay.
Well, I'm
so thinking the second half of January. So since we have a meeting early.
We're meeting the second Monday of the month. If we met the second and third in the month of January and February, and we put form-based code on the agenda for one of those meetings to cover in its entirety, and then the subdivision regulations in another one of those
That'd be
meetings,
I think
we'd be able to hear from
but it had to be the fourth Monday.
maybe.
in January anyway, so you're pushing them up to February at that point. I don't know. Whatever. As long as we can advertise it, because the third Monday in January is a holiday, and then.
And it would
fourth
be,
Monday.
maybe it's a short meeting, but still one where we can just focus on form-based code alone and work through that. And then the same for the subdivision
Yeah,
regulations.
we could try to go create some kind of presentation that makes it as simple as possible, what we're talking about item by item.
It'd be really great in that meeting because I see 2 engineers here, but it'd be great to have more engineers, more architects, and more neighborhood leaders present as we talk about some of those, so that you could host 15 meetings and nobody shows up until it's all of a sudden on our agenda, and then they're going to be here and they're going to care. And I don't know how else to hear from them than to put it on the agenda.
Do you want to hear from subdivision regs too, real quick? But Mr. Chairman, that was absolutely our intention for this subdivision regulation street design standards, is to get it to the planning commission, and then as long as it takes for us to review that, it's going to stay on the agenda. And if that takes a couple months, that's fine.
I just think my point is that it would be better in a separate meeting. Eric's mic isn't.
So that's it. Oh, it's on. Now? Okay, good. Did want to come back and say, particularly because there are some new planning commission members, each one of you should have received a packet that has a brief presentation about proposed changes, the red line changes to the, proposed changes to the Chattanooga subdivision regulations. And then the last sheet is a modified version of the existing variance form. Again, we can go through this in more detail at that time when we set that line by line for those changes. In summary, we do want to propose these changes both to restore language that was removed from previous versions of the subdivision regulations, looking at peer cities to make sure that we are adequately providing guidance for the development community and protection for communities about that, and then also working with city departments to make sure that we're aligning with the requirements that they have operationally, as well as for life safety. One thing I will note, the version of the subdivision regulations that is in front of you was what was presented to you in November. The City Council deferred the potential changes to the IFC adoption, which they're considering tomorrow. That did modify a little bit. And so based on how City Council does end up acting there, we may make some additional changes to that. The biggest difference is that they are maintaining the additional local amendments to the IFC that are currently adopted, and they would be continuing that forward. So there wouldn't be a change from that, but it may just change the language that is in front of you. So we will share that. As Emily mentioned, we had an open session. There was some good representation and really good discussion about that. Based on that, we have currently extended the public comment period to December 21st, but based on the time that we set, we can certainly extend that further up to that point, and then certainly during that time as well. Happy to go into detail about any questions with this or any of that process, but we'll work together to get that time set.
Any questions?
Just to clarify, this only goes through planning commission, correct?
That's correct. City Council does not have to take any action on it.
Mr. Chairman, what are your thoughts in terms of how this moves forward in timeline? And
I think it's slow. But the challenge for us is that, what we would be doing here would be adopting these subdivision regulations. As a planning commission, we may or may not have had the opportunity to hear from the public. Staff has had these public meetings and opportunity to hear from them. I just think it's really important that we do as well. Sometimes in the past, subdivision regulation changes have been made, and it happens to be that an engineer is here and sees it on the agenda, and we get the benefit of those comments. And so my concern is that we would take action on these without having heard from the public. As a planning commission, staff might have had all the meetings in the world, but that's not quite the same. I mean, that's like an applicant coming up here saying, "Hey, we had all these neighborhood meetings. Here's what the neighborhood said," and the neighborhood's not here for us to hear from them. So I just think it's got to be a separate meeting. I know nobody has time for more meetings, but I think we need a separate planning commission meeting where we can just take a deep dive into the subdivision regulations and the form-based code. And that would be in January or February. And it sounds like the soonest we could do form-based code would be January. And so maybe we take on another meeting in February where we can go through each one of these and take action on every one of them rather than an adoption of the entire thing all at once.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to like to say I agree with your thoughts there. I think it would be very helpful with the two issues we're discussing here. They're so massive and have the major impact on the community that I think they warrant separate meetings. That I think that'd be good to get that public input. And I just would also like to add that I'm excited that we are getting this stuff back into the subdivision regulations. But now that we're finally getting to that point, I want to make sure we get it right. So,
and we will make sure we have Ben Taylor here or whoever's necessary for the, from Public Works when we talk about the subdivision regs. And I would just want to say Emily has done a great job of getting us to this point with the form-based code, and Brandon and Eric and the street design standards. So thank you all.
I'll just want to say we've provided a summary of comments, but we'll provide more detail about the comments that we've received. Certainly don't want to keep any of that information from you. That's great.
Mr. Fisher, did you want to comment on any of this? You just sat through this whole meeting? Okay. Donna, you want to comment? Yeah, I mean, we'd love to hear from you now. That's great. Well, Donna's
I don't
here,
have anything ready. I've got notes probably back at the office, but I think one of the things that we asked for is they're updating their city details as well, and to look at the subdivision regs and pass that ahead of them issuing all of their draft standard city details. I'd like to look at them together because I think they go together. I think they have a couple of street section details that they put on the website that you can kind of go through. But I know they're doing a comprehensive overhaul. And I would think at least at this point, they would have a draft version. We've been using the draft driveway apron for 8 years now. So I would like to at least see a draft version that we could comment on as well.
I think I just wanted to add that subdivision regulations, there's a lot of different type of terrain and topography throughout the city, and that a one size fits all might not necessarily work. You want to design a subdivision that can complement the terrain and really preserve land disturbance, while being safe for the public. So I think, specifically if you look at the IFC with the 26-foot wide streets and so on and so forth, that sort of seems a little contradictory to what the purposes of subdivision regulations are, which has to do with trying to preserve open space and, preserve trees and natural features. So I think a discussion with the Planning Commission would be really great. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would just note that the Planning Commission gave out a variance today for width of streets for alleys. And one of the parts of this subdivision regs is to put in place a very understandable variance process, let's just say.
Well, building on that, the subregs do not include a right-of-way for alleys. This says you have to do 50 foot for a local street, so they had to get a variance for that because it doesn't address alley right-of-ways.
Right.
It's all coming back. So I think one of the things that we've had a variance before on also was your actual right-of-way corner when you've got reduced setbacks or zero setbacks where you're pushing the buildings way up close to the street. Sometimes it's appropriate to have a zero radius, and I think the subdivision regs has 25 feet now. They may be amending that a little bit. So that's one thing. I'd also like some flexibility on sidewalks. Right now, they want sidewalks on both sides everywhere, carte blanche. And I've met with Scott Martin at least twice on different projects where they're leaning more towards the overall development where you do a wider kind of greenway multi-use path section that might be 10 or 12 feet wide and traverse through the neighborhood. And you may not have a sidewalk on both sides of the street within the subdivision network. You might have it on one side to provide connectivity, especially in areas that may be a little bit unsafe for pedestrians. But my neighborhood doesn't have any sidewalks. We walk in the street and you provide a small sidewalk. People aren't going to walk on it. They're going to walk in the street because it's wider. They can push their carriages next to each other. And so that's in the PUD too. That's something that we really bumped up against on some of these larger projects where we're providing connectivity and just not having to do the sidewalk on both sides. I'd like to see a mountable curb and valley gutter, because then what you're not having to do is do your curb and then take it out as each house goes along. You don't know where your driveways are going to go. Where you've got small lot sizes, the street trees, 30 foot can be hard, especially with utilities. Maybe you figure out linear footage of the whole neighborhood and you get a number of trees and you just put them somewhere in the neighborhood. You might congregate them in an open space area or a public area, amenity area. Flexibility where you want in view shed, not just having the same.
When you said it was all coming back to you, you weren't kidding. So I don't.
You asked for it.
I did. But what I want to do is I think there's a few people in our city that are more familiar than staff with our subdivision regulations. I put you in that camp. I mean, there are a few of you that know as much about our subdivision regulations as our staff does, and you're one of them. And it's that kind of very input that we want to make sure we do, because some of that stuff you're talking about is the very kind of stuff. I mean, Beeson Drive, for example, is a private subdivision because that was the only way to solve the street tree problem. Mm-hmm. And you could not put street trees in on top of EPV's power, and there was nowhere to put the street trees. So we had to go to a private subdivision in order to do it, which is really burdensome. So the things you're talking about are the very things we want to hear about. But I don't know.
I know we want to get out of here.
To hear them all.
But if you do have a meeting, or if you want us to write those down, just real quickly on the street tree thing, where I had mentioned other places where you've got cut and fill slopes where you've had to grade to make grade. That's an excellent place to plant back some of those street trees and work through the lighting. So thanks.
Thank you, Donna. She does. She does. Doug, did you want to say anything? No, you're welcome to say anything. I know Donna was going to go through the entire subdivision regulation. She was at the very beginning of it.
Well, I've got my version of it marked up in notes if you want to go line by line. I'm just joking. No, I would hesitate after sitting through, what was that, about 2.5 or 3 hour, 4 hour, to suggest that you slow anything down. And I don't ever come up here and ask for slow anything down. What I'd say is this is a tough month and window here that's been outlined to really get that much done and get people together that needs to be. We would like another shot. And it's not, you guys have done your job, no doubt. It has been a long time. But we would just suggest that maybe let's get through to the first of the year. And we've got a team of pretty doggone good engineers that have been weighing in on this, been helping me through the technical parts of it, that I'd like to kind of wrap up before we get to the bottom of it, if that's okay.
So then it goes on the agenda in, do we need to decide right now when it goes on the agenda?
It's fine. I mean, we're not going to put it on the agenda until after we have our work session as discussed. I mean, it'll be on the, we're not planning on taking.
Okay, so we'll have a public work session and then it'll go on the agenda.
Yeah, because if we're amending the subregs, we have to give 30-day notice on that meeting, unlike a typical planning commission meeting. So we'd have to do the work session and then decide after that what agenda this will be placed on.
Okay.
Just for the legal notice.
Okay.
I think that's what I'm hearing. I think February, then probably depending on what happens at that meeting, we'll know what PC agenda to add it to for official action.
That's great. Thank you. We do have a time on the agenda for public comment on non-agenda items. We're not doing that today. Approval of Planning Commission minutes of November 14th. We have a motion to approve and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you.